My family tried to use my own housewarming party to steal my $2.5 million home. They thought I would smile politely while they ruined me. They thought I would stand there in a linen dress, holding a champagne flute, nodding like a well-trained daughter while they turned the most important house I had ever owned into a prop for their lies. They forgot one thing. I get paid to destroy scandals for a living. Not with screaming, not with chaos, not with dramatic accusations thrown across a room. That was never my style. My work was quieter than that, cleaner, more surgical. People came to me when their reputations were burning, when lawsuits were circling, when mistresses had screenshots, when executives had lied to boards, when founders had misplaced investor money and suddenly needed the public to believe it was all a misunderstanding. I knew what panic looked like before it had a name. I knew how guilty people blinked, how liars over-explained, how desperate people tried to control the first version of the story because they understood something most people did not. Whoever frames the truth first usually owns it. For years, powerful people had paid my firm obscene amounts of money to manage exactly that. My name is Vivian Calder. I was 34 years old when this happened, founder and CEO of Calder Strategic Communications. And by then, I had built a life my family loved to brag about in public and punish me for in private. The house was supposed to be proof that I had finally made it out. It sat inside a gated community where the streets were too quiet, and the landscaping looked like someone polished every leaf before sunrise. The house itself was white stone and smoked glass, set back behind a private gate with tall hedges, clean lines, and a backyard that looked like it belonged in a luxury resort brochure. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, an infinity edge pool, a chef's kitchen, a temperature-controlled wine wall I did not need, but absolutely loved, and a primary suite with glass doors that opened to a terrace overlooking the city. $2.5 million, paid in cash, no mortgage, no cosigner, no family contribution, no man quietly backing me, no parent's name anywhere near the deed. I bought it through a private LLC on Nathan Price's advice. Nathan was my corporate attorney, and he was the kind of man who could say, "That would be unwise," in a tone that made billionaires rethink their life choices. He had handled the purchase quietly, professionally, and with the kind of legal armor I had learned to appreciate after a lifetime of relatives treating my boundaries like suggestions. The house had smart locks on every exterior door, security cameras covering the driveway, gate, pool, side yard, front entry, and garage. Exterior lights I could control from my phone, a private gate system, automated guest codes, motion sensors, audio at the entrances where legally allowed. Every access point was documented, time-stamped, and stored. Some people saw all of that as excessive. I saw it as peace. Because to me, that house was never just expensive stone and glass. It was the first place I had ever owned where no one could open the door with guilt. The first place where my mother could not cry her way into my living room. The first place where my father's voice had no automatic authority. The first place where my younger sister, Dahlia, could not walk in, touch everything, insult half of it, and still somehow leave with my apology. That house was safety, and I should have known my family would hate it for exactly that reason. The original housewarming was supposed to be simple, elegant, but simple. Close friends, a few trusted employees, Nathan and his husband, my event coordinator, Lena, and maybe 20 other people who had actually loved me without sending me invoices disguised as emotional obligations. Lena had planned a beautiful afternoon party. Soft music, past appetizers, a small champagne bar, fresh flowers and low arrangements, nothing too flashy, nothing corporate, nothing performative. For once, I wanted an event that did not require me to manage anyone's ego. Then my mother called. 2 weeks before the party, Celeste Calder phoned me at 8:17 in the morning, crying so hard I thought someone had died. I stepped out of a client meeting because, despite everything, some daughter reflex inside me still responded to my mother's tears like an emergency alarm. "Mom, what happened?" she sniffled. "Nothing happened, Vivian. I don't know how to talk to you anymore." That was how Celeste started every manipulation. Not with a request, with a wound. I closed my office door. "What do you need?" A soft sob. "Why do you assume I need something?" "Because you do," I thought. Out loud, I said nothing. She sighed in that delicate, exhausted way she had perfected over 61 years. "It's about Dahlia." Of course it was. My younger sister, Dahlia Mercer, was 29, pregnant, beautiful, spoiled, and emotionally allergic to consequences. She had spent her life being described as sensitive whenever she was cruel, overwhelmed whenever she was selfish, and misunderstood whenever she was caught lying. Dahlia had recently announced her pregnancy to our immediate family, but apparently that was not enough. She wanted a moment, a real announcement, something beautiful, something memorable, something with photos. And my mother had decided my housewarming was the perfect place. "It would mean so much to her," Celeste said. "She's been feeling insecure lately." "About what?" "You know how pregnancy is." I did not know how pregnancy was because I had never been pregnant, a fact my mother could turn into a weapon with the precision of a surgeon. "She just wants to feel celebrated," Celeste continued. "And your house is so beautiful. It would be such a meaningful family moment." "It's my housewarming, and no one is taking that away from you." That was the first lie. I leaned against my desk and stared out over downtown. "Mom, Vivian, please, just one toast, one little announcement. You have so much. Dahlia is starting a family. Can't you share the spotlight for one afternoon?" There it was. Share the spotlight. As if attention were a natural resource I had been hoarding. As if my own home, my own achievement, my own celebration were selfish by default unless it could be repurposed for Dahlia. I should have said no. A healthy person would have said no. But I had been raised in a house where saying no to Dahlia meant becoming the villain by dinner. My father, Martin Calder, would call me cold. My mother would cry. Dahlia would say I was jealous. Then the story would spread through the extended family until I was somehow a bitter, lonely woman refusing to celebrate an unborn baby. So I did what daughters like me are trained to do. I made the smaller sacrifice to avoid the larger war. "One toast," I said. "That's it." Celeste's tears disappeared so quickly it was almost impressive. "Oh, honey, thank you. This is why I know you have a good heart, even when you try to hide it." I remember standing there with the phone in my hand after she hung up, feeling like I had just signed a contract I had not read. Within 48 hours, the guest list changed. Dahlia wanted to invite a few friends. Then Julian wanted to invite some business associates. Then my father said it would be rude not to include certain investors since this were practically family friends now. Then my mother told Lena there needed to be more champagne because this was also a baby celebration. Then the menu expanded because Dahlia could not eat certain things but also wanted options. Then someone suggested a balloon installation, which I rejected so firmly Lena laughed out loud. By the end of the week, my intimate housewarming had mutated into a luxury networking event for my brother-in-law's ego. Julian Mercer was the kind of man who looked rich from a distance. Custom suits, expensive watch, leased luxury car, teeth too white, hair always arranged like he had just stepped away from a camera crew. He ran a tech company that used words like blockchain, decentralized finance, expansion, investor confidence, and market disruption, usually in sentences that became less clear the longer he spoke. My parents adored him, not because he was kind. He was not. Not because he was stable. He was not that either. They adored him because he performed success in a language they understood. He gave Dahlia designer bags, took her to rooftop restaurants, tagged her in inspirational posts about building generational wealth, and called my father Sir, just often enough to make Martin feel respected. I never trusted him. In my world, vague confidence was usually where fraud went to hide. Still, I agreed to let him bring a handful of investors. Then a handful became 12, then 12 became 20. Then Celeste told me not to be difficult because Julian was under a lot of pressure, and this party could be good for everyone. For everyone, I repeated when she said it. She did not hear herself, or maybe she did. My father called 3 days before the party to remind me that family was about generosity. You should be grateful, Martin said. This gives your house some meaning. I looked around my office, at the awards on the wall, the skyline beyond the glass, the employees whose salaries I paid, the empire I had built without $1 of his help. My house already has meaning. He made a dismissive sound. You know what I mean. A home is about family, not just success. That pause before success told me everything. To Martin, my money was useful, but my independence was offensive. He liked my achievements best when he could claim some credit for them, and least when they reminded him I no longer needed him. Dahlia arrived at my house the day before the party to look at the flow, which meant walking through rooms she had not paid for while making comments no one had requested. The backyard is actually perfect, she said, one hand resting dramatically on her stomach. It's nice that it's finally being used for something maternal. I stared at her. She smiled. What? I mean, you're so corporate. This place needs warmth. Dahlia had always known exactly where to press. No husband, no children, no softness, no real life. That was the story my family had written about me, because the alternative was admitting that I had built something they could neither control nor understand. Julian wandered in behind her, taking a phone call near my kitchen island, speaking loudly about capital, optics, and investor confidence. My mother fussed over Dahlia's dress. My father inspected my wine wall and asked why anyone needed something so excessive. Only one person in that entire family ever seemed uncomfortable with the performance. Maya, Julian's 16-year-old daughter from his first marriage, stood near the hallway with her backpack over one shoulder, quiet and watchful. She had always been that way at family dinners, like someone trying not to take up too much space. Dahlia interrupted her constantly. Julian called her difficult. My parents treated her like an awkward accessory from Julian's previous life. I noticed things. I always notice things. I noticed when Maya stopped reaching for food after Dahlia made comments about her appetite. I noticed when her shoes were worn thin while Dahlia posted unboxing videos of luxury baby items. I noticed when she flinched at Julian's sharp tone, then pretended she had not. A year earlier, at a family dinner, I overheard Maya quietly telling Julian her school lunch account was empty. Julian told her he would handle it. 2 weeks later, I checked with the school under the excuse of sponsoring student meals through my company and found out her account was still negative. So I paid it. Then I added enough to cover the rest of the year. Maya texted me once from a number I did not recognize. Thank you. That was all it said. I replied, anytime. We never discussed it in person. Now, standing in my hallway, Maya glanced at me like she wanted to say something. But Dahlia called her name sharply, and the moment disappeared. That night, after everyone finally left, I walked through my house alone. The caterers were confirmed. The flowers were chilling. The champagne was arriving at 10. The rental company had already marked the lawn for the shade structures. Lena texted me 3 times to assure me everything would be tasteful despite what she called the expanding family circus. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, barefoot on cool marble, trying to convince myself I had made the right choice. One afternoon, I thought, one uncomfortable afternoon, and then it would be over. That was the lie I told myself because I was tired. Because some small, embarrassing part of me still wanted my mother to look at me with pride instead of calculation. Because some daughter-shaped wound inside me still believed that if I gave enough, achieved enough, smiled enough, paid enough, hosted enough, maybe one day they would stop treating me like the family bank and start treating me like family. The next morning, the house was awake before I was. By 8, caterers were unloading crates in the driveway. Florists carried in arrangements of white roses and green hydrangeas. Lena stood near the pool with a clipboard, sunglasses, and the expression of a woman preparing for battle. Staff moved through the kitchen. Someone tested the outdoor speakers. The champagne delivery arrived early. The house looked beautiful, too beautiful for what it was about to become. I stood at the kitchen island in a cream silk blouse and tailored trousers, watching strangers prepare my home for a party I no longer recognized. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. There was no message at first, just a video file. 3 minutes and 12 seconds long. I frowned. In my line of work, unknown numbers usually meant one of 3 things: a reporter fishing, a client panicking, or a problem getting worse. I stepped away from the caterers and moved into the butler's pantry where it was quiet. The thumbnail was dark and grainy, like the camera had been hidden behind something. For 1 second, I considered sending it to my security team unopened. Then another text appeared beneath it. Please watch before the party. No name, no explanation, just that. My thumb hovered over the screen. I remember the exact sounds around me in that moment. Ice being poured into a silver bucket, a florist laughing softly in the hall, Lena telling someone the champagne bar needed to be moved 6 inches left, the low hum of my expensive refrigerator, the soft, stupid peace of a morning that did not yet know it was over. I pressed play. At first, I thought it was a client emergency. It wasn't. It was worse. It was my family sitting in Julian's living room, laughing about how they were going to steal my house. Before I tell you what they said in that video, you need to understand why it did not surprise me as much as it should have. Hurt me? Yes. Shock me? Not completely. Because my family had been stealing from me long before they ever tried to steal my house. They just usually called it something prettier: responsibility, sacrifice, family loyalty, being the bigger person. In the Calder house, I was not raised to be loved. I was raised to be useful. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the child who got good grades without being reminded, cleaned up without being asked, apologized even when I had been the one insulted, and somehow understood by age 10 that my feelings were only welcome if they did not inconvenience anyone else. Dahlia, on the other hand, was fragile. That was the word my parents used for her whenever she broke something. When she screamed, she was overwhelmed. When she lied, she was afraid. When she stole, she was confused. When she embarrassed the family, she was going through something. But if I reacted to any of it, if I raised my voice, walked away, cried too loudly, or asked why the rules were different for her, suddenly I was cold, dramatic, ungrateful, too sensitive, too hard on my sister. My mother used to say, "Vivian, you know Dahlia doesn't handle pressure well," as if pressure were something I had been born immune to. My father's version was shorter. "You're older. Act like it." That sentence raised me more than either of my parents did. When Dahlia spilled juice on my homework, I had to rewrite it because she felt bad enough already. When she borrowed my clothes and ruined them, I was told not to be materialistic. When she told our cousins I was mean to her, I was made to apologize because peace matters more than pride. When she screamed that I thought I was better than everyone because I studied instead of going out, my mother comforted her and told me not to make my sister feel small. Dahlia was praised for existing. I was praised for enduring. And people who grow up being praised for endurance often confuse suffering with love for far too long. The first time my family took money from me, I was 8. It was not a lot, maybe $80 total, saved in birthday bills and small amounts from neighbors who paid me to water plants when they traveled. I kept it in a purple tin box under my bed because I wanted to buy a telescope. I was obsessed with space that year. I wanted to look at the moon and feel like the world was bigger than our house, bigger than my parents' moods, bigger than Dahlia's tantrums. Then Dahlia wanted a new costume for a dance recital. Not needed, wanted. My mother found my tin box while straightening my room and told me family helped family. She'll pay you back, Celeste promised. Dahlia did not pay me back. No one mentioned it again. But I remembered. I remembered every small theft because my family never treated them like theft. They treated them like withdrawals from an account they had opened in my name without permission. By the time I was 18, that account had grown much larger. I had saved $40,000. People hear that number and think I must have come from money. I did not. My parents were comfortable enough to care deeply about appearances and strained enough to use money as a weapon. We were not poor, but every dollar in our house came with emotional strings attached. So I made my own. I tutored younger students after school. I worked weekends at a stationery store. I wrote scholarship essays like my life depended on them because it did. I worked summers at a law office filing documents in a room so cold I used to bring a sweater in July. I took every paid opportunity I could find and spent almost nothing. No movies, no spring break trips, no new clothes unless absolutely necessary. Every dollar went into the account. That money was my exit plan. I had been accepted into my dream university. Not Ivy League, but close enough to make my guidance counselor cry when she saw the letter. Their communications program was one of the best in the country. I had a partial scholarship, but not enough. The $40,000 was supposed to cover what financial aid did not. I remember printing the acceptance email and holding it in my hands like a passport. For the first time, I could see a door. Then Dahlia took my father's car. She was 16, angry about being told she could not go to a party, and drunk enough to think revenge was a transportation plan. She backed into the mailbox, hit the curb, panicked, and kept driving. 3 miles later, she crashed through the front window of a small bakery that had been owned by the same couple for 22 years. No one died. That was the miracle everyone focused on. But there were injuries, property damage, a lawsuit, insurance complications, police reports, angry business owners, a family name my parents were desperate to keep clean. Dahlia cried for 2 days, not because she had hurt people, because she thought everyone hated her. My mother stayed in her room, brushing her hair and whispering, "You're not a bad girl. You made a mistake." My father made phone calls behind closed doors. I was not included in any of those conversations. Then, 3 weeks before I was supposed to send my university deposit, I logged into my savings account and saw the balance. Zero. At first, I thought it was an error. I refreshed the page. Then again, then again. As if money could reappear through force of panic, I ran downstairs with my laptop open. My father was in the kitchen, drinking coffee. "Where is my money?" He did not even pretend not to know. He set his mug down and sighed like I had inconvenienced him. "We had to handle Dahlia's situation." My ears started ringing. "My college money?" "You had savings. The settlement needed to happen quickly." "You took all of it?" "Vivian," my mother said from the doorway, her voice already trembling in that warning way. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I turned to her. "You stole from me." Her face changed. Not guilt, offense. "Do not use that word with us." "What word should I use?" My father stood then. He was always taller when he wanted obedience. "Dahlia needed it more. You're smart. You'll figure something out." That sentence was a blade. Not because it was loud, because it was final. There was no apology, no promise to repay me, no acknowledgement that they had just taken years of my work and handed it to the daughter who had broken the law. Dahlia did not come downstairs. She did not look me in the eye. Later, I heard her laughing on the phone in her room. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, sat on the floor, and stared at the empty account until the screen went dark. That was the night I learned something that shaped the rest of my life. No one was coming to save me, not my mother, not my father, not the idea of fairness, not family. So I saved myself. I declined my dream school because I could not afford it anymore. I went to a cheaper state university that gave me more aid. I worked before classes, after classes, and on weekends. I learned how to sleep in fragments. I learned which campus buildings stayed open late so I could study somewhere warm. I learned how to stretch one grocery trip across 2 weeks and how to make cheap coffee taste less like punishment. I also learned people. That was the gift hidden inside all that damage. When you grow up in a family where love is conditional and the truth is constantly rewritten, you become fluent in subtext. You learn to hear what people are not saying. You learn how guilt enters a room before confession does. You learn that liars do not always avoid eye contact. Sometimes they hold it too long. You learn that panic has rhythms, that shame has tells, that manipulation often arrives dressed as concern. By the time I graduated, I could read a room faster than most people could read a headline. Crisis communications found me almost naturally. A local politician's son got arrested and needed messaging. A nonprofit director was accused of misusing funds and needed a response plan. A tech founder said something idiotic on a podcast and needed the internet to stop chewing on him by Monday. I was good at it. Not because I liked liars, because I understood them. I understood how they moved. I understood the stories they told themselves before they tried selling those stories to everyone else. I understood the difference between remorse and reputation management, between fear of harm and fear of being caught. Eventually, I moved from agencies to private consulting. Then I built Calder Strategic Communications. At first, it was just me, one assistant, and a rented office with bad lighting. 5 years later, I had a full staff, a client list people whispered about, and enough money that my father suddenly started introducing me as our Vivian at events where he had once acted embarrassed by my ambition. That was another lesson. The same family that resents your independence will happily take credit for your success. My parents did not become kinder when I became wealthy. They became more entitled. Family dinners became my bill by default. No one discussed it. The checks simply drifted toward me like gravity had chosen a favorite. Dahlia's emergencies became mine. A credit card she had temporarily overused, a lease deposit she forgot was due, a medical bill that turned out to be for cosmetic dental work, a designer stroller she absolutely needed because cheap ones are unsafe, though she was barely 8 weeks pregnant at the time. If I hesitated, Celeste would call. Vivian, it must be nice to only think about yourself. That was one of her favorite lines. Only think about yourself. As if not having a husband or children meant I had no expenses, no loneliness, no responsibilities, no life deserving protection. Martin was more direct. You can afford it. I could. That was the trap. Because when you can afford to help, people who do not respect you will pretend your ability creates their right. And I helped more than I should have. Not because I was stupid. I want to be clear about that. I knew what they were doing. I knew I was being used. Every invoice, every dinner, every temporary loan that never returned, every holiday gift received with a lukewarm smile and followed by a request for something larger, I saw all of it. But there was still a child in me standing in that kitchen at 18, waiting for my father to say he was sorry. There was still a child in me hoping my mother would choose me without needing to be forced. That is the embarrassing thing about growing up unloved in specific ways. You can become powerful, disciplined, wealthy, feared, respected, even admired, and still carry one small starving part of yourself that wants the people who hurt you to finally admit they were wrong. My family fed that starving part just enough to keep it alive. A compliment in public. A birthday dinner where no one insulted me until dessert. My mother squeezing my hand and saying, "You've done well," then asking if I could cover Dahlia's vacation deposit 15 minutes later. My father calling me sharp, then telling me not to intimidate Julian with too many questions. Julian. From the first day Dahlia brought him home, I knew he was performance wearing cufflinks. He arrived in a charcoal suit too formal for Sunday lunch and complimented my parents' house as if he were touring a potential investor property. He used my father's first name only after asking permission, which Martin loved. He brought Celeste flowers. He kissed Dahlia's temple every time someone looked in their direction. He was charming in the way salesmen are charming when they know the product is weak. At lunch, he talked about his company for 40 minutes without clearly explaining what it did. Blockchain infrastructure is really about trust, he said. I asked, what is the actual product? He smiled at me like I had asked a cute question. We're building an ecosystem. What does it currently do? It creates opportunities for liquidity across emerging digital asset communities. So nothing yet? Dahlia gasped. Vivian, Julian laughed smoothly. No, I like directness. He did not like directness. His jaw tightened for half a second. So quick most people would have missed it. I did not. Over the years, Julian refined the act. Custom suits, leased cars, inspirational posts about disruption and generational wealth, photos from conference lobbies where he was not speaking, vague announcements about partnerships that never named partners. He called his company pre-revenue, which in many cases is founder language for broke with better lighting. My parents worshipped him. They believed he was giving Dahlia the glamorous life she deserved. They loved the rooftop dinners, the tagged photos, the luxury bags, the way Dahlia could say things like, Julian's investors and our private round, while Celeste glowed with borrowed importance. I watched him dodge basic financial questions with the grace of a man who had practiced. I watched Dahlia become more unbearable beside him. She stopped asking for help and started implying it was beneath me not to offer. When she got pregnant, the entitlement became holy. Suddenly, every boundary was an attack on the baby. Every inconvenience was stress. Every refusal was cruelty. My mother began speaking about Dahlia's pregnancy like it was a royal event the rest of us were spiritually obligated to fund. So when my housewarming became Dahlia's announcement party, I knew exactly what was happening. I knew my party was being hijacked. I knew Julian was using my home as scenery. I knew my parents were letting him because, to them, my success was most acceptable when it could be redirected toward Dahlia. And still, I agreed. I told myself I was choosing peace. The truth was uglier. I was still trying to earn love from people who had been charging me for it my entire life. That morning in the butler's pantry, with caterers moving through my kitchen and flowers blooming across my counters, I stood with my phone in my hand and watched the dark thumbnail of that anonymous video. Some part of me already knew. Maybe it was the timing, maybe it was the message. Please watch before the party. Maybe it was the way my stomach went cold before I even pressed play, like my body had recognized danger before my mind was willing to name it. I thought about my purple tin box. I thought about the empty college account. I thought about every dinner check, every unpaid loan, every time my mother had made my loneliness sound like selfishness. Then I pressed play, and within 30 seconds, the last childish part of me that still wanted their love went completely silent. The video opened on Julian's living room. At first, all I saw was a slanted view of a coffee table, the edge of a cream sofa, and a bottle of red wine breathing beside 4 glasses. The footage was shaky, slightly tilted, like the camera had been hidden somewhere low and careless, behind a stack of books maybe, or inside a shelf. The audio was not perfect, but it was clear enough to ruin lives. Julian sat closest to the camera, one ankle crossed over his knee, his phone in one hand and a wine glass in the other. Even through the grainy recording, he looked polished. White shirt open at the collar, expensive watch catching the light. That practiced founder posture, relaxed but alert, like he expected every room to eventually become an audience. Dahlia was curled beside him on the sofa, one hand resting on her stomach, even though she was barely showing. She wore a soft pink lounge set that probably cost more than some people's rent, her hair arranged in glossy waves over one shoulder. My father, Martin, sat in an armchair with the heavy satisfaction of a man who believed he had already won. My mother, Celeste, was next to him, holding her glass with both hands, smiling that small, nervous smile she wore whenever cruelty was happening, and she had already decided not to stop it. They were not scared. That was the first thing I noticed. They were not whispering in panic. They were not desperate people discussing a terrible mistake. They were comfortable, loose, amused. They were celebrating. Julian leaned forward and tapped something on his phone. "Tomorrow has to look effortless, he said. That's the key. People don't invest in need. They invest in momentum." My father nodded like Julian had just delivered scripture. Dahlia laughed. "Vivian's house screams momentum." My mother smiled. "It is a beautiful property." "It should be," Dahlia said, lifting her glass. She only spent her entire personality on it. They all laughed, not loudly, not dramatically. Worse, naturally. Like mocking me was a familiar family language. I stood frozen in the butler's pantry, my thumb hovering near the edge of the screen, the sounds of my real housewarming being assembled behind me while I watched my family discuss me like furniture. Dahlia took a sip of wine. "She's going to be so proud of herself tomorrow," she said, "walking around like some tragic little CEO princess. Look at my marble. Look at my pool. Look at my sad, silent, childless museum." My mother made a soft sound. "Dahlia," but it was not a correction. It was a performance of one. Dahlia rolled her eyes. "What? It's true. She has no husband, no kids, no real life. What else is she going to do with all that money?" There are insults you can laugh off because they are stupid. There are insults you can dismiss because they come from people whose opinions stopped mattering years ago. Then there are insults that slide perfectly into the oldest wound you own. That one did. Not because I believed Dahlia was right. I did not. I loved my life. I loved my work. I loved the freedom I had built with my own hands. I had chosen not to marry the wrong person, just to make other people comfortable. I had chosen not to have children because my life had not unfolded that way, and because I knew motherhood should not be entered as a public relations strategy. But my family had always treated my independence like an emptiness. No husband meant no witness. No children meant no excuse to refuse them. No real life meant my time, my money, and my home were available for redistribution. On the screen, Celeste laughed. My mother laughed. It was small, almost polite. That hurt more than Dahlia's words, because Dahlia was Dahlia. Cruelty from her was weather, predictable, unpleasant, survivable. But my mother had heard her daughter call me a lonely ATM with no real life, and she laughed like it was a joke told at brunch. My father leaned back. Vivian has always been difficult, even as a child. Too serious, too proud. Cold, Celeste added softly. She has a good heart somewhere, but she makes people work so hard to find it. I almost laughed then. Not because anything was funny, because I had spent my entire life working for scraps of love from people who thought I made them work too hard. Julian raised his glass toward my parents. That's exactly why this worked. Dahlia smiled. Because she's desperate? Because she's controlled, Julian said. Vivian would rather swallow glass than look unstable in public. The room on the video shifted into focus around that sentence. My body went still, not emotionally still, professionally still. There is a difference. Emotionally still is shock. Professionally still is when every piece of you begins collecting evidence. Julian set his glass down and reached for a folder on the coffee table. By the time everyone arrives, the setting does half the work for us. Luxury property, private gates, staff, catering. Investors see the house, they see scale, they see confidence. My father nodded. And then you make the announcement. Exactly, Julian said. Not too aggressive, just clean. Mercer Digital is proud to announce the acquisition of a private executive retreat and headquarters property as part of our expansion strategy. Something like that. For a moment, I could not process the words. Acquisition, headquarters, property, my property. Dahlia clapped softly, delighted. It sounds so official. It is official enough for the room, Julian said. That's all we need tomorrow. My mother frowned slightly. But Vivian will object. Julian smiled. That smile is still one of the ugliest things I have ever seen. No, she won't. Dahlia laughed. She might make that face. What face? Celeste asked. Dahlia imitated me, pressing her lips together and widening her eyes in stiff disapproval. The one where she wants to murder everyone but remembers she went to therapy. They laughed again. Julian continued. She will not contradict me in front of 50 people, especially not investors, especially not in her own house. It would make her look emotional, unstable, petty. She has a reputation to protect. My father's voice came next. She understands appearances. That was the moment I realized this was not just Julian. I had wanted absurdly for this to be Julian's scheme. For my parents to be passive, foolish, maybe manipulated. I wanted a version of reality where Celeste and Martin were guilty of weakness, not participation. The video did not give me that mercy. Martin leaned forward and picked up the folder. And the lender? Julian's expression sharpened. We only need the bridge financing to clear. Once tomorrow's commitments come in, we stabilize. The guarantor draft gives them comfort. My stomach turned cold. Dahlia adjusted a pillow behind her. Explain that part again. Julian looked irritated for half a second, then smoothed it away. Private lender, short-term capital. They want assurance someone with assets can backstop the loan if necessary. And Vivian is the assurance, Dahlia said. My mother's eyes flicked to my father. Martin opened the folder. The video angle did not show the full document, but I saw enough. A signature page. My full legal name. The name of my LLC, property address. A line that looked like a personal guarantee. My father tapped the paper with one finger. It looks close enough, he said. I stopped breathing. Julian said, You're sure? I know my daughter's signature. No, I thought, no. Martin continued, calm as church bells. Besides, no one is going to call her before Monday. By then, Julian has the commitments, the loan is funded, and Vivian can be handled privately. Handled. That was the word my father chose for me. Not warned, not included, not asked. Handled. Dahlia gave a little shrug. She'll be mad, Celeste sighed. Vivian is always mad about something. She will threaten everyone, Martin said. Then she will calm down. She always does. There are lies people tell because they do not know you. Then there are lies people tell because they remember an older version of you and mistake your restraint for permission. My father remembered the 18-year-old girl whose college fund he emptied, the girl who screamed once, cried privately, then rebuilt her life without burning the family down. He thought I was still her. That was his mistake. Julian lifted his wine glass again. After tomorrow, the investors wire. Once they wire, everything changes. No one cares about paperwork once momentum is real. I knew exactly what he meant. Fake success creates real money. Real money hides fake success. That was not ambition. That was fraud with catering. I watched the video once all the way through, then I watched it again. The second time was worse because I knew where the knives were. I heard Dahlia call me lonely before she said it. I watched Celeste's mouth curve before the laugh. I saw Martin's hand move toward the forged document before he touched it. I listened to Julian map out the use of my home, my reputation, my silence, and my legal identity like they were assets on his balance sheet. My hand was trembling by the end. I hated that. I hated the physical betrayal of it, the way my body reacted like I was still a child caught in a room with people bigger than me. My throat tightened. My palm felt slick against the phone. My chest had that hollow pressure grief creates when it arrives too fast to organize. I did not cry. Not because I was strong. I did not cry because something inside me had finally gone numb. The last small, stupid hope I had carried for my family did not shatter loudly. It simply stopped breathing. For a few seconds, I stood in that pantry surrounded by imported tile and custom cabinetry, listening to caterers unpack silverware in the kitchen, and I felt 18 again. I saw the empty bank account. I saw my father's unmoved face. I heard him say, "You're smart. You'll figure something out." He had been right about one thing. I did figure things out. I figured out how to survive them. Now, I was going to figure out how to stop them. The first rule of crisis management is simple. Do not react to the first version of the disaster. Preserve it. So, I saved the video. Not once, 5 times. I downloaded it to my phone, uploaded it to encrypted cloud storage, sent it to my secured evidence folder, forwarded it to Nathan Price with the subject line, "Urgent, family fraud/property/guarantee." Then I exported still frames from the clearest moments. Julian speaking, Dahlia laughing, my father holding the document, the visible portion of my LLC name, the timestamp embedded in the file metadata. My hand stopped trembling once I had tasks. Pain is messy. Procedure is clean. I opened my property records portal and confirmed what I already knew. My LLC was still the owner. No liens I had not authorized, no recorded transfer, no legitimate acquisition document, no deed change. Then I opened my smart home dashboard. No unauthorized entries, no door opened overnight, no guest code used since Dahlia's visit the previous afternoon. But there had been attempts. 3 failed access attempts at 11:42 p.m. at the side service door. 1 failed attempt at the garage keypad at 11:49, another at the front entry at 12:03 a.m., all using Martin's emergency code. The code I had given him 6 months earlier after my mother told me I was cruel for refusing family access in case something happened. Something had happened. They had tried to get into my house before the party. I took screenshots of every log, then I deleted nothing. Another rule: never destroy evidence, even evidence that makes you furious. I sent the access logs to Nathan too. He called me 4 minutes later. I stepped farther into the pantry and closed the door. "Tell me you have not confronted them," Nathan said. "No. Hello." That was why I paid him. "I haven't." "Good. Where are you?" "At the house. Staff are setting up. For the event they intend to use as a fraudulent investor presentation?" His voice was flat, but I knew Nathan well enough to hear the anger underneath. "Yes." "Vivian." "I know." "No," he said. "I need you to hear me carefully. This is no longer family misconduct. This is identity fraud, attempted financial fraud, possible wire fraud depending on what communications have gone out, and forgery involving your LLC. My knees felt weak for the first time. I leaned against the counter. The guarantor draft. Could it bind me? Not if forged, but that does not mean it cannot create immediate legal exposure if a lender believes it. I am checking now whether anything has been submitted formally. Martin said no one would call before Monday. Then we assume someone might. I closed my eyes. In the kitchen, I heard Lena ask someone where I had gone. Nathan continued, "Do not touch any original documents if they appear. Do not privately negotiate. Do not let them inside the property. Do not threaten them in writing. Send me everything." "Already did." "Good. I am pulling Julian's corporate filings and checking complaints." At the sound of Julian's name, something clicked in my mind. "Complaints?" Nathan went quiet for half a second. That half second told me he knew more than he had said. Nathan. I have heard his company name before. From where? 2 investor side inquiries over the past month. Nothing direct through us, but enough that I remember it. Missed payments, delayed distributions, vague reporting. One person used the phrase Ponzi adjacent, though that is not a legal conclusion. Of course. Of course, Julian's emergency was not bad luck. It was collapse. The housewarming was not just about showing off. It was a lifeboat. My house was scenery. My name was collateral. My silence was the bridge between his lies and other people's money. Nathan exhaled slowly. "I am going to be very clear. You need to separate yourself from this immediately and visibly. If they use your property today and investors believe you are involved, even informally, we have a bigger problem. They won't use it." My voice sounded different. Not loud, not angry, settled. Nathan heard it too. "Vivian," he said carefully, "what are you planning?" I looked through the cracked pantry door at my beautiful kitchen. The flowers, the staff, the champagne, the carefully arranged proof that I had been willing to bend one last time for people who saw bending as an invitation to break me. Then I looked back at my phone, at the frozen image of my father's hand on the forged signature page. "I'm canceling the party." "Good. And I'm changing the locks." Also good. And then, I said, I'm going to let them explain to their investors why the headquarters they acquired won't open for them. Nathan was silent. Then he said, I will advise you against anything theatrical. It won't be theatrical. Vivian, it will be documented. That was the closest I had come to smiling. Nathan sighed, but there was something like approval beneath it. Keep the gates open. Do not physically trap anyone. If Dahlia claims medical distress, call emergency services immediately. Do not deny water or shade if accessible. Make your position simple. No authorization, no entry, event canceled. I know. I'm serious. So am I. Another call came through while we were speaking. Unknown number again. I ignored it. A new text appeared. Did you get it? I stared at the message. For the first time since opening the video, I wondered who had sent it. Someone in Julian's apartment? Someone close enough to hide a camera? Someone scared enough not to sign their name? Maya's face flashed in my mind. Quiet, watchful, backpack over one shoulder, eyes always measuring exits. I did not respond. Not yet. I could not risk pulling her into something before I understood the danger. Nathan spoke again. I just found something. What? Julian's company is already under scrutiny. Not formally public yet, but there are investor complaints moving through channels. This video may be the missing link between misrepresentation and intentional fraud. The pantry seemed to narrow around me. Behind the door, my housewarming continued setting itself up for a crime. I straightened. For 34 years, I had been the daughter who absorbed the cost. The responsible one. The quiet one. The one who figured it out. But my family had forgotten that survival is not the same as forgiveness. And silence is not the same as surrender. That was when I stopped thinking like a daughter and started thinking like the woman people hire when the truth needs a weapon. Nathan once told me that the most dangerous moment in any scandal is the first clean minute after the truth appears. Not the discovery, not the explosion, the minute after. Because that is when people decide whether they are going to protect themselves with discipline or destroy themselves with emotion. Standing in my butler's pantry, holding a phone full of evidence against my own family, I understood exactly what he meant. Every human part of me wanted to call my father. I wanted to hear him deny it. I wanted to ask him how his hand could hold a document with my forged signature and not shake. I wanted to ask my mother whether she laughed because it was funny or because she had finally stopped pretending I was a daughter. I wanted to ask Dahlia what kind of emptiness lived inside her that made my life look like something she was entitled to harvest. Most of all, I wanted to call Julian and tell him he had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. But revenge, real revenge, is not a tantrum. It is architecture. You do not throw the first stone just because your hand is full of them. You study the glass house, you find the load-bearing wall, you decide which piece breaks first so the whole structure comes down in the direction you choose. So I did not call them. I called Nathan back. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me exactly what you have done since we hung up," he said. "I preserved the video in multiple locations. Sent you the access logs, checked property records, no deed changes, no liens I don't recognize, no formal transfer, staff are still here, party setup is underway." "Good. Do not speak to your family directly unless I am present, or unless it is in writing and extremely limited. They're going to arrive in a few hours." "I know. They're bringing investors." "I know that too." His calmness irritated me for half a second, then steadied me. Nathan's voice had that effect. It was not comforting exactly. It was more like standing behind reinforced glass. He continued, "Here is what you are not going to do. You are not going to accuse them over the phone. You are not going to threaten criminal consequences in a text. You are not going to physically block anyone from leaving. You are not going to create any situation where they can claim you endangered them, trapped them, or denied medical care. Dahlia will use the pregnancy." Of course she will. There was no hesitation in his voice, just recognition. "If she claims distress," Nathan said, "you call emergency services immediately. You do not diagnose. You do not argue. You do not make jokes about it in the moment. Let professionals decide whether it is real." "I'm not trying to hurt her." "I know. I am making sure no one can pretend you did." That was why Nathan was worth every dollar I paid him. He did not just protect me from my enemies. He protected me from the version of myself my enemies could provoke. "Do I let them onto the property?" I asked. "Your exterior driveway and approach are already accessible through the open gate?" "Yes. Keep the main gate open. Make sure vehicles can leave. But no one enters the house. No one accesses secured areas. No one uses your property as a stage for fraudulent representations. If they refuse to leave after being told the event is canceled, that becomes a trespass issue." "Can I record?" "You can rely on your existing home security system. Do not add anything new in a way that creates privacy concerns. Exterior cameras are fine. Entry intercom is fine. Audio depends on location and notice, but do not play amateur detective. Preserve what your system lawfully captures." I almost smiled. "You know, amateur detective is offensive. You are a professional crisis strategist, not law enforcement." "Fine." "And Vivian, yes, you do not have to win the whole war today." I looked through the pantry door at the champagne being unpacked in my kitchen. "No," I said, "just the first battle." Nathan exhaled softly. "Then make it clean." Clean. That word became the center of everything I did next. I stepped back into the kitchen and found Lena Ross standing near the island, phone in one hand, eyebrows raised. Lena was 39, elegant, terrifyingly organized, and one of the few people I trusted to manage chaos without becoming part of it. "There you are," she said. "The rental team wants to know if the secondary bar goes near the pool steps or under the west pergola. Also, your mother has texted me 4 times about champagne flutes, and I would like permission to develop selective blindness." I looked at her. Her expression changed. Event planners, good ones, are like crisis managers in prettier shoes. They can tell when the weather has shifted. "What happened, mate?" she asked. "The party's canceled." To her credit, Lena did not gasp. She simply lowered her phone. "Canceled as in delayed, or canceled as in I need to start making calls before someone opens the oysters?" "Canceled as in no guests, no bar, no food service, no staff on site by noon." Her eyes sharpened. "Is everyone safe?" That question told me I had hired the right woman. "Yes." "Legal issue?" "Yes." "Family?" I paused. Lena's mouth tightened. "Of course." "I'll pay every vendor in full," I said. "Add whatever rush fee you need. No one loses money because of this." "Vivian, I am less concerned about the shrimp budget and more concerned about the fact that you look like someone just set your childhood on fire." The kindness almost broke me, not because it was dramatic, because it was simple. My own family had been caught planning to defraud me, and Lena's first instinct was to ask whether I was safe, not whether I was overreacting, not whether I should consider Dahlia's feelings, not whether family deserved privacy. Just safe. I swallowed. "I need the food donated." "All of it?" "As much as legally and safely can be." Prepared items, sealed items, anything the shelter can accept. Women's and children's shelter preferred. If they cannot take something, send it to a community kitchen. If there are restrictions, follow them. I do not want waste. Lena nodded once and started typing. No dramatic explanations to vendors, I added. Family emergency, event canceled, full payment, donation instructions. Understood. Within 10 minutes, the machine that had been building my housewarming began reversing itself. The champagne stayed sealed. The caterers repacked trays. Florists moved arrangements into transport boxes for delivery to the shelter's administrative offices and common rooms. Staff who had been arranging my home for spectacle now dismantled the evidence of my last attempt at peace. I moved through the house with my phone in my hand, changing access one layer at a time. First, all temporary guest codes. Deleted. Then the vendor access code. Disabled. Then the catering side entry code. Disabled. Then Martin's emergency code. I stopped with my thumb over the screen. For half a second, I remembered the day I created that code. My mother had called me selfish for not giving immediate family access. She said, "What if I fall? What if your father needs you? What if something happens and we can't reach you?" So I gave Martin a code, not because I trusted him, because guilt is sometimes stronger than judgment when it has been installed early enough. Now I watch the little digital profile with his name on it, Martin Calder, emergency access. I pressed delete. The system asked me to confirm. I confirmed. Then I changed the master code, reset the lock permissions, removed every old guest profile, and triggered a security refresh across the entire property. Next came the exterior systems. Pool controls stayed locked. Outdoor kitchen disabled. Beverage refrigerators powered down. Entertainment speakers disconnected. Fountain off. Fire features off. Shade controls locked in place. Garage access disabled. Side yard gate locked from entry but not from exit. Main driveway gate open. That last part mattered. Let them come in far enough to be seen. Let them leave whenever they wanted. Let no one say Vivian Calder trapped a pregnant woman in the heat. I was not building a cage. I was removing a stage. The distinction mattered legally. It mattered morally, too. By late morning, the house looked strange. Too clean, too quiet. Flowers gone, food gone, staff gone. The backyard that had been marked for a luxury event now sat empty beneath the sharp California sun. The pool glittered indifferently. The white stone patio looked almost sterile without furniture arrangements and champagne stations softening it. Lena was the last vendor-side person to leave. She stood with me near the front entry, sunglasses pushed onto her head. "I sent confirmation of the donations," she said. Women's shelter accepted most of the sealed and safely transportable items. Community kitchen took the rest. Full vendor payments processed. I'll send documentation. Thank you. She studied me. Do you want me to stay? I almost said yes. That surprised me. I was used to handling disasters. I had built an entire career around being the calmest person in the room, but there was something uniquely ugly about standing in your own beautiful house after discovering your family had looked at it and seen not your achievement, not your safety, not your healing, but an opportunity. I need you not to be involved, so I said. Lena understood what I meant. Then I am officially uninvolved, she said. But personally, I am one phone call away. After she left, Kelnin settled. Not peaceful silence, the kind that hums. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by marble counters and glass walls and morning light. The house smelled faintly of flowers that were no longer there. On the island sat one forgotten ribbon from a floral arrangement, pale green and curled at the end like a question mark. For 1 second, I wanted my mother, not the mother I had, the mother other people seemed to get, the one who would be horrified, the one who would drive over and hold my face in both hands and say, "I am so sorry they tried to hurt you," the one who would choose me without needing an audience. For 1 second, I wanted to call Celeste and ask why. Then I remembered the video. She had already answered me. I went upstairs and packed a weekend bag. Not much. 2 changes of clothes, laptop, chargers, toiletries, a blazer, because apparently even emotional collapse needed tailoring in my life. I put the clothes into a leather duffel with hands steadier than I felt. Then I walked through every room one more time. My bedroom with its soft gray walls. The office I had planned to use for writing speeches and reading case files. The guest rooms my mother had already started assigning in her imagination. The wine wall my father had mocked. The backyard Dahlia said was finally being used for something maternal. No. This house would not host their lie. This house would not be used to launder Julian's fraud through my credibility. This house would not be the place where I smiled politely while men in expensive shoes mistook my silence for consent. I set the alarm, confirmed the cameras, and left. I drove 2 hours north to a private spa resort where I had once taken a client after his company's board forced him into rest before a congressional hearing. It was expensive, discreet, and designed for people who wanted to disappear without looking like they were hiding. I checked into a villa under my assistant's prearranged corporate privacy profile. The receptionist handed me a key card and said, "We hope you have a peaceful stay." I almost laughed. In the villa, I placed my laptop on the desk, opened the security dashboard, and watched my house appear in 12 camera angles. Front gate, driveway, front door, garage, side entry, backyard, pool, kitchen, exterior, service path, north fence, south fence, intercom. Every frame was clear, every timestamp correct. Nathan was on standby. So was my private security consultant, not to interfere, not to escalate, just to document, advise, and contact authorities if necessary. I ordered tea I did not drink. Then I sat in a white robe at a desk overlooking a garden designed to calm wealthy nervous systems, and I waited for my family to arrive at the crime scene they thought was a celebration. At 12:47 p.m., the first unfamiliar car appeared at the gate. Black sedan, then another, then a silver SUV. Investors, most likely, early, polished, confused when no valet greeted them, but not alarmed yet. At 12:58, Julian's leased luxury car turned into my driveway like it owned the road. I leaned closer to the screen. He stepped out first, wearing a navy suit and sunglasses, phone already in hand. Dahlia emerged slowly from the passenger seat in an expensive cream maternity dress, one hand pressed to her stomach as if cameras were present even when they were not. Behind them came my parents, Martin in a blazer too heavy for the heat, Celeste in pearls, both of them smiling. Both of them acting like hosts. Behind them came more investors, men and women in summer linen, luxury watches, polished shoes, careful expressions, people who had come expecting champagne, staff, and a major announcement. Instead, they found my empty driveway, my locked front door, and a house that had withdrawn its consent. I watched Julian look around, first with confusion, then irritation, then the faintest flicker of fear. That flicker was the first honest thing I had seen from him. At exactly 1 o'clock, Julian's luxury car sat in my driveway. Behind him came the investors, behind them came my family, and behind all of them came the consequences. The first thing Julian did was smile. That told me everything. Guilty people do not panic immediately when the room changes. Not the practiced ones. The practiced ones smile first. They use charm as a tarp. throwing it over whatever mess they have not figured out how to clean yet. On my security feed, I watched him stand in my driveway beneath the hard afternoon sun, sunglasses on, shoulders squared, phone in hand, smiling at the investors as if the empty property were part of the plan. "Give me 1 second," he said. The front entry camera caught his voice clearly. One of the investors, a woman in a white blazer and gold sunglasses, looked toward the house. "Where is everyone?" Julian gave a light laugh. Small timing issue with the event team. That was his first public lie of the day. Not his worst, just his first. My father stepped forward, like he had been rehearsing his role. "These things happen with large homes. Too many systems." Large homes, as if he had any authority over mine. My mother moved beside Dahlia, fanning her gently with a folded program from her purse. Where she had gotten a program? I had no idea. Celeste was the kind of woman who could produce props for emotional theater out of thin air. Dahlia stood near the hood of Julian's car, one hand on her stomach, the other adjusting her hair. She looked irritated, not distressed. Her cream maternity dress was expensive and impractical, the kind of dress purchased less to be worn than to be photographed. Behind them, more cars were arriving. A silver Mercedes, a black Range Rover, a navy sedan. People stepped out slowly, confused by the lack of valet, lack of music, lack of staff, lack of any sign that a sophisticated housewarming or executive announcement was about to happen. They had dressed for champagne. They had arrived at silence. That silence did more damage than screaming ever could have, because rich people, or people trying to become rich, understand atmosphere. They understand signals. They understand when something looks wrong before anyone says the word wrong out loud. There were no tents, no bar, no trays of food, no flowers, no catering staff, no music floating over the pool, no linen-covered tables, no champagne tower Celeste had insisted would be tasteful if done correctly. There was only my locked house, my empty patio, and Julian standing in the driveway with the smile of a man trying to hold up a collapsing ceiling with his teeth. I sat at the desk in my resort villa, wearing a white robe I had not earned the relaxation for, watching everything from 12 camera angles. My tea had gone cold beside me. Nathan was on a video call, muted unless I needed him. His face occupied a small square in the corner of my laptop screen. Expression unreadable. Legal pad in front of him. "Gates are still open," he said. "Yes." "Vehicles have clear exit?" "Yes." "No staff on site?" "No." "Good, good." A strange word for what I was watching. Julian walked toward the front door with my father close behind him. Martin carried himself with the aggressive confidence of a man who believed property rights were mostly a matter of tone. Julian glanced once over his shoulder at the investors. "Let me get the house opened up," he called. "The smart system can be temperamental." My house's smart system was not temperamental. It was obedient. That was why Julian was about to hate it. He reached the front keypad and entered a code. Martin's old emergency code. I saw it appear on my security dashboard as a failed attempt. "Access denied." Julian's smile twitched. He entered it again. "Access denied." My father leaned closer, blocking the keypad with his body as if secrecy mattered after fraud. "Try it slowly," Martin muttered. Julian tried it slowly. Access denied. The woman in the white blazer took one step closer. "Is there a problem?" "No," Julian said quickly. "Just a temporary system issue." Another investor. A tall man with a shaved head and a watch large enough to qualify as architecture looked up at the front of my house. "Why would your new headquarters lock you out?" There it was. The first crack. It was small, almost polite, but every person in that driveway heard it. Julian turned with a laugh that arrived half a second too late. We have not fully transitioned to operations yet. Your announcement said the acquisition was complete, the man said. I leaned toward my screen. Announcement. So Julian had already sent something. Nathan, still muted, wrote a note. My jaw tightened. Dahlia drifted closer, irritation cutting through her performance. Julian! Give me a minute, he snapped under his breath. The investors noticed that too. People always think collapse begins with a dramatic confession. It rarely does. It begins with tone, with a delayed answer, with a locked door, with a founder who cannot access the headquarters he claims to have acquired. My mother started texting me first. Her messages appeared one after another. Vivian, open the door. This is not funny. Your sister is pregnant. This heat is dangerous. Do not embarrass this family. I watched the live feed while the messages came in. Dahlia was standing in the shade of Julian's car, drinking bottled water offered by one of the investors. She was not fainting. She was not doubled over. She was not gasping. She was scrolling on her phone with one thumb and checking her reflection in the dark window of the SUV. Then she uncapped a lip gloss and carefully reapplied it. I saved the clip. Celeste sent another message. If anything happens to this baby, it is on you. That was when I felt the old reflex rise. The urge to explain, to defend myself, to say, the gate is open. She can leave. She has water. She is in the shade. You are choosing to stand there because you want access to my house. But I had learned the hard way that manipulators do not ask questions because they want answers. They ask questions because they want openings. So I gave them one sentence, not privately. In the family group chat. First, I uploaded the 3-minute video. The same video of Julian, Dahlia, Martin, and Celeste drinking wine and laughing about using my house as fake corporate property. Then I typed, party canceled, locks changed, explain yourselves to your investors. I pressed send. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. On the security feed, I watched phones begin to vibrate. Dahlia looked down first. Her face changed so quickly it felt almost satisfying enough to be dangerous. The irritation drained, then the color. Julian checked his phone next. He opened the chat, went completely still, then whipped his head toward my front door as if I might be standing behind it. Martin read the message slowly. Celeste covered her mouth. The investors did not know yet what had happened, but they sensed the temperature shift immediately. That was another thing guilty people forget. Even when no one can see the evidence, they can see the body absorbing it. Dahlia began typing. This was a private conversation. Then, you're insane. Then, I am pregnant and you are abusing me. Celeste followed. Vivian, take this down immediately. That video was taken illegally. You are destroying this family. Martin wrote, you are making a serious mistake. Then, Julian called me. I declined. He called again. I declined again. Then Dahlia called. Declined. Then my mother. Declined. Then my father. Declined. Nathan unmuted himself. Do not answer. I'm not. Julian typed, we can explain. I replied, great. Start with the part where you forged documents using my LLC. The typing bubbles vanished. On camera, Julian stepped away from the investors. Phone pressed to his ear even though I was not answering. He turned his back, shoulders tense, voice low and sharp. Dahlia moved toward my mother. Celeste grabbed her wrist. Martin looked at the investors, then at Julian, then at my locked front door, as if the door itself had betrayed him. My phone buzzed again. Dahlia, I am getting dizzy. I looked at the feed. She was no longer in the shade. because she had chosen to walk toward Julian to hiss something at him. She had water in her left hand and her lip gloss in her right. I sent the saved screenshot to the group chat. Dahlia standing in the shade, applying lip gloss, timestamp visible. Then I wrote, "The lip gloss looks great. The acting needs work." Nathan closed his eyes. "I said no jokes in the moment," he reminded me. "She's not in medical distress. You are not a doctor. She is weaponizing the baby. She may be, but if she claims medical distress again, offer to call emergency services in writing." He was right. Annoyingly, expensively right. So I typed, "If Dahlia needs medical assistance, I will call 911 immediately. The driveway gate is open. Anyone may leave at any time." That message mattered, not emotionally, legally. Celeste responded, "Open the house and stop being cruel." I did not answer, because the house was not a hospital. It was not a courtroom. It was not a family bank. And it was no longer available as the set of Julian Mercer's fake empire. Outside, investors were beginning to move. One man stepped away to make a phone call. A woman stood near her car, reading something on her phone with a deepening frown. Maybe the announcement Julian had sent. Maybe corporate filings. Maybe the group chat if someone had forwarded the video already. Scandals move quickly when rich people suspect their money is in danger. The woman in the white blazer approached Julian again. "Julian," she said, "what is going on?" He turned, smile reassembled badly. "A family dispute. Nothing relevant to the company." The tall investor with the shaved head said, "It became relevant when you invited us to a property you represented as a corporate acquisition." Julian's laugh cracked. "I never said—" "You did," the woman said. "In writing." Another investor lifted his phone. "I have the email." Julian looked at Martin. That was beautiful. Not because I enjoyed pain, because it was the first moment Julian realized Martin Calder could not save him from a room full of people who wanted documentation. My father stepped forward anyway. "This is a misunderstanding," Martin said. The tall investor turned to him. "Who are you?" Martin blinked. It was such a small humiliation, such a precise one. In our family, Martin was the voice, the authority, the man everyone was expected to accommodate. But to these investors, he was just an older man sweating through a blazer in someone else's driveway. "I am Vivian's father, so," he said. "Does Vivian own the property?" the woman asked. Martin's jaw tightened. "This property is part of a family arrangement." "No, it isn't," I said aloud to my empty villa. Nathan made a low sound. "Careful, Martin." But Martin could not hear him. He continued, "My daughter is emotional. She has always been difficult in family matters. Julian had authorization to host this event." The investors looked toward the locked door. Authorization. Another word guilty people use when consent would be too specific. Julian tried to regain control. "Look, I understand the optics are not ideal." The tall investor laughed once. "The optics? This is a private matter. You invited us here to discuss emergency bridge commitments," the woman said. Emergency bridge commitments. There it was, in the open. Several heads turned. Dahlia whispered, "Julian, shut up." He ignored her. "No one is asking anyone to wire anything today." The woman lifted her eyebrows. "That is not what your deck said." I looked at Nathan's video square. He was writing quickly. My family had not just planned fraud. They had already begun distributing it. The empty party had become exactly what I needed it to be. A vacuum. With no champagne, no music, no staff, no performance, there was nothing for Julian to hide behind. Every missing detail pointed back at the lie. Where was the acquisition? Where was the access? Where was the host? Where was the corporate retreat? Where was the momentum? All they had was heat, locked doors, and a founder sweating through his collar. Dahlia, realizing the investors were no longer looking at her with admiration, shifted strategies. She placed one hand dramatically on her stomach and leaned against Celeste. "I don't feel well," she said louder. My mother gasped on cue. "Dahlia!" Several investors glanced over, uncomfortable. Dahlia lowered her lashes. "The stress is too much." I picked up my phone and typed, "Dahlia, I am calling emergency services for you now." Before I could press send, Dahlia straightened. "No," she snapped, loud enough for the camera to catch. "Don't call anyone." Then she realized what she had done. Too late. The woman in the white blazer looked at her with open dislike. I sent the message anyway. "Emergency services can be called immediately if needed. Please confirm." No response. Dahlia stepped back into the shade. The baby apparently no longer required a police report. By then, the investors had started forming small groups. That is what people do when confidence dies. They stop listening to the person at the center and start building private consensus at the edges. Two near the Range Rover were comparing emails. One asked Julian for closing documents. Another asked for proof of occupancy. Someone else wanted to know whether investor funds had already been used toward the alleged acquisition. Julian's answers became shorter, then sharper, then less grammatical. My father kept interrupting, which made everything worse. Celeste kept whispering at Dahlia to stay calm, which made Dahlia angrier. Dahlia kept blaming Julian under her breath, which the cameras caught beautifully. At one point, Julian stormed back to the front keypad and tried the code again. "Access denied again! Access denied again!" The lock gave a flat electronic beep that sounded to me like applause. Then he tried the door handle. It did not move. The tall investor said, "You are attempting to enter a property you cannot prove you control." Julian spun around. "I can prove it." "Then do. I have documents." "Show them." Julian hesitated. That hesitation was a confession with better posture. Martin reached into his inner jacket pocket. I sat up straighter. Nathan leaned toward his camera. "Is he holding the forged guarantee?" he asked. "I think so." "Good. Let him produce it voluntarily." There was a sentence I never imagined hearing about my father. "Good. Let him produce the forged document." Martin pulled out folded papers. My mother reached for his arm. "Martin." He shook her off. That was the thing about men like my father. They mistake escalation for control. When a situation slips, they press harder, louder, more publicly, believing authority is something you can summon through force. He opened the papers and held them up. "This family has financial agreements in place," he said. The woman in the white blazer did not take the paper. Smart woman. "With whom?" "With Vivian." "Is she here?" "She does not need to be here." The tall investor looked almost amused now. "For an agreement involving her property?" Julian snatched the papers from Martin before anyone could examine them too closely. "That is not relevant to today's conversation," he said. But it was too late. The investors had seen enough to know there were documents. They had also seen enough to know Julian did not want those documents inspected. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a wild second, I thought it might be the person who had sent the video. But then a text appeared. "This is Grant Ellison. I am at your property. Are you aware Julian Mercer is representing your home as a Mercer digital asset?" I showed Nathan. "Investor?" he asked. "Looks like it." "Do not give a narrative. Give a clean denial." I typed, "This property is solely owned by my LLC. Mercer Digital has no ownership, leasehold, acquisition, or access rights. Any statement otherwise is false." Nathan nodded. Good. I sent it. 30 seconds later, Grant Ellison looked down at his phone on the driveway camera. Then he showed the message to the woman in the white blazer, then to the tall investor. Julian saw it happening. And that was when he began to panic. Real panic is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like a man checking his phone too many times, licking his lips, adjusting his jacket, and realizing every exit leads to a question. He approached the investors again, voice raised. I think everyone needs to remember that early-stage investing involves complexity. The tall investor said, Does complexity usually involve locked doors? Another investor laughed. Not kindly. Julian flushed. My wife is pregnant, he said, gesturing toward Dahlia, because cowards will grab whatever shield is closest. This situation is becoming stressful for her. Dahlia looked pleased to be useful again. The woman in the white blazer said, Then she should leave. Silence. Perfect, brutal silence. Because, of course, Dahlia could leave. They all could. The gate was open. The cars were right there. The rideshare apps worked. The neighborhood was safe. No one was holding them in place except greed, pride, and the desperate hope that if they stayed long enough, my locked house would somehow become Julian's asset. One investor got into his car, then another. Julian moved toward them. Let's not overreact. The first car started. A second door slammed. My mother turned on my father. Do something, Martin snapped. I am doing something. You're making it worse, Dahlia hissed. Julian pointed at her. Do not start. Do not point at me, she said. On my laptop screen, my family began to fracture in real time. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. A lie can hold a group together only as long as everyone believes they will profit from it. The moment consequences arrive, loyalty becomes math. And the math was changing fast. The woman in the white blazer walked to her car, but did not leave. Instead, she stood beside it and made a phone call. Her tone was low, controlled, and furious. Grant Ellison texted me again. Thank you. I suggest you preserve all footage. I replied, already done. Nathan smiled faintly for the first time all day. Investor side counsel is going to enjoy this, he said. Outside, Julian looked around at the departing cars, the murmuring investors, my locked front door, and my father holding papers he should never have created. His face changed. He needed authority, not legal authority. He did not have that, not moral authority. He had burned that. He needed someone with a badge to stand there and make his lie feel official again. So Julian did the thing desperate men do when charm fails. He called the police. He put the phone on speaker, either because he wanted the investors to hear him sound confident or because panic had made him stupid. This is Julian Mercer, he said, pacing in my driveway. I need officers dispatched to a property where we have a legal access dispute. The former occupant has illegally locked us out of a corporate asset. Nathan's head lifted. Former occupant. Corporate asset. My pulse slowed, not from fear, from focus. Because Julian had just taken his lie out of the driveway and given it to emergency dispatch, which meant the next version of the truth would not be handled by family. It would be handled by records, documents, ownership, evidence. The things I trusted more than blood. Julian thought calling the police would save him. It was the first honest mistake he made all day. Julian spoke to the dispatcher like a man who believed confidence could substitute for ownership. Yes, we are at the property now, he said, pacing in front of my locked house. It was recently acquired by my company. We have investors here for a corporate event, and the former occupant has changed the access codes without authorization. Former occupant. I sat very still at the desk in my resort villa. There are insults meant to wound, and there are lies meant to erase. That one was both. Former occupant. Not owner, not Vivian Calder, not the woman whose money bought every inch of stone and glass behind him. Just an obstacle. A woman removed from her own life by a sentence. Nathan was no longer taking notes. He was watching the feed with the stillness of a man preparing to bill someone into ruin. "Did dispatch hear that clearly?" he asked. My system captured his side. Good. On the camera, Julian turned slightly away from the investors, but he kept his voice loud enough for them to hear. That was the problem with performance. Once it becomes instinct, people forget when silence would save them. My father-in-law has supporting documents, Julian continued. We need officers to compel access before this situation escalates. My father-in-law. Supporting documents, compel access. Every word was another brick in the wall he was building around himself. The woman in the white blazer stood near her car with her arms folded. Grant Ellison, the investor who had texted me, was speaking quietly to someone on his phone. The tall investor with the shaved head had stopped pretending not to record. His phone was held low, but the angle was obvious. My mother hovered beside Dahlia, whispering urgently. Dahlia looked furious, not frightened, not sick, furious. She had imagined this day ending with applause, photos, and people telling her she looked radiant. Instead, she was sweating in my driveway while her husband told police my house belonged to him. Julian ended the call and turned back to the group. Officers are on their way, he announced. No one looked relieved. That was when I knew the investors were smarter than he had hoped. A guilty person expects authority to intimidate everyone else because authority intimidates them. But people with money at risk do not fear police as much as they fear paperwork. They fear discovery. Records, timelines, emails, contradictions. The police were not going to clean up Julian's problem. They were going to document it. My phone buzzed. Celeste, Vivian, stop this before it gets worse. I did not respond. A second message came in. Your father is furious, as if that still meant something. Then, Dahlia is under terrible stress. I typed one sentence. The driveway gate is open. Everyone is free to leave. Then I sent it and muted the thread again. Nathan glanced down at something off screen. I have county records pulled. I also have the LLC documentation ready. If officers need confirmation, I can speak with them. I want you on intercom. Only when necessary, let them make their false statements first. That sounded cold. It was also correct. In crisis work, premature correction can be a mistake. People think the truth is strongest when delivered immediately. It is not. Sometimes the truth is strongest after the lie has fully exposed its shape. So we waited. 12 minutes later, a patrol car appeared at the gate. Then a second. The officers drove slowly up the private road and parked near the front curve of the driveway, leaving room for other vehicles to exit. Two officers stepped out first. A woman, mid-40s, composed, hand resting near her belt but not on her weapon. A younger male officer followed, scanning the scene. They saw what anyone would see. A locked luxury home, a cluster of overdressed people. A pregnant woman, being theatrically fanned by her mother. A man in a navy suit approaching too quickly. Officers, Julian said, raising one hand. Thank you for coming. The female officer held up a palm before he could get too close. Who called? I did. Julian Mercer. And what is the issue? This property is a corporate asset of Mercer Digital, Julian said. We have a scheduled investor event. The prior occupant, Vivian Calder, changed the locks and is refusing access. The officer looked past him at the house. Prior occupant? She asked. Yes. My father stepped forward. My daughter is unstable in family conflicts. This is her way of making a scene. The officer looked at him. And you are? Martin Calder, Vivian's father. Do you live here? No, but are you on the deed? Martin's mouth tightened. Julian cut in. The deed is in transition. There are corporate documents. Do you have them? Julian hesitated for a fraction of a second. The officer noticed. I noticed the officer noticing. That was the first moment I liked her. Julian pulled up something on his phone and showed her the screen. This is the acquisition summary. She did not touch the phone. Sir, I need actual proof of legal access. Deed, lease, court order, signed authorization from the owner, anything like that. This is a private corporate transaction. That is not what I asked. Behind Julian, one of the investors shifted. My father, impatient as always, reached into his jacket. I have paperwork, he said. Nathan leaned toward his screen. Here we go. Martin unfolded the document he had already waved around like a weapon. Even through the camera, I recognized the format now. The same guarantor draft from the video. My name, my LLC, my supposed signature. He handed it toward the officer. This establishes Vivian's involvement, Martin said. The officer accepted it carefully, read the first page, then the next. Her expression did not change, but something in her posture did. She looked from the paper to Martin. Is Vivian Calder present? Julian said. She is refusing to appear. The officer ignored him. Mr. Calder, did you see your daughter sign this? Martin paused. It was a beautiful pause. Small, deadly. I am familiar with her signature. That is not what I asked. My father's face darkened. He was not used to women in authority refusing to follow the rhythm of his intimidation. She authorized it, he said. Did you see her sign it? Another pause. No? The officer looked back down at the document. Julian stepped in. This is being blown out of proportion. We only need access to proceed with the scheduled event. Vivian is attempting to sabotage a business transaction because of personal resentment. The tall investor let out a quiet laugh. The officer glanced at him. Are you part of this business transaction? She asked. He said, apparently less than I was told. Julian shot him a look. The officer's attention returned to the house. Has anyone attempted to contact the owner? My phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. Nathan said, likely law enforcement. You can answer. Keep it factual. I answered, this is Vivian Calder. The female officer's voice came through. Ms. Calder, this is Officer Ramirez. I'm at the property on Briar Summit Lane. Are you the owner of this residence? I am the beneficial owner through my LLC. The property was purchased in cash. Mercer Digital has no ownership, lease, acquisition, access rights, or authorization to use it. Are you willing to grant access to the individuals currently on site? No. Are they permitted to remain? No. The event was canceled. They were informed. The driveway gate is open and they are free to leave. Are you nearby? I am not on site. My attorney is available and can provide documentation. Please hold. She lowered the phone but did not disconnect. On camera, I watched her speak briefly to the second officer. Julian tried to interrupt, but she held up a hand again. That hand was becoming my favorite character in the story. Nathan opened a secure folder. Vivian, he said, I'm ready. I activated the exterior intercom from my dashboard. My voice came through the discreet speakers near the front entry, calm and clear enough that every person in my driveway turned toward the house. This is Vivian Calder. Officer Ramirez. My attorney, Nathan Price, is available to verify ownership and provide documentation. The effect was immediate. Dahlia flinched. Celeste looked like the house itself had started testifying. Martin's face hardened. Julian's smile died completely. Nathan joined the intercom through the secure call link, his voice level and precise. Officer Ramirez, this is Nathan Price, counsel for Vivian Calder and the registered agent contact for the owning LLC. I can provide my bar number and documentation. The property is owned by Calder Holdings West, LLC. It was purchased in cash. There is no mortgage, no co-signer, no recorded transfer, no lease to Mercer Digital, and no authorization for Mr. Mercer or Mr. Calder to access the residence. Julian said loudly, "That is not accurate." Nathan continued as if Julian were a weather event. Additionally, Ms. Calder received evidence this morning suggesting that Mr. Mercer, Martin Calder, and others plan to represent this property falsely to investors as a corporate acquisition. We also have reason to believe documents bearing Ms. Calder's name and LLC information may have been forged and presented to private lenders. The air changed. Even through a security camera, I could feel it. Investors moved back. Not dramatically, just enough. Fraud is contagious in rooms where money is present. The moment the word appears, everyone wants physical distance from the infected person. Officer Ramirez looked at the paper in her hand again. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "do you have any legal document proving current right of entry into this residence?" Julian's face flushed. "We have an agreement in process." "That is not a right of entry. It is a corporate matter. It is a locked private residence. My investors are here. That does not create property rights." The younger officer returned from his patrol car. He had been checking something, likely county records. He spoke quietly to Ramirez, but the camera audio caught enough. "County shows Calder Holdings West, LLC. No transfer, no Mercer entity." Officer Ramirez nodded. My father heard it too. His face changed in a way I had never seen before. Not guilt, fear. Small, but real. Because Martin understood documents when they worked for him. He understood signatures, ownership, authority. He had spent his life believing systems protected people like him. Now the system was looking back at a document he had touched and asking why my name was on it. Officer Ramirez turned to him. "Mr. Calder, where did you get this document?" Martin said. "It was prepared as part of a family financial arrangement." "By whom?" He looked at Julian. Julian looked at him. There it was. The first visible handoff of blame. Julian said, "Martin provided the signature page." My father's head snapped toward him. "You asked me to confirm her signature." "I asked if it looked accurate." "You told me it was standard." "You said she would cooperate." Dahlia hissed, "Both of you, stop talking." The woman in the white blazer stared at them like she had just watched a prospectus catch fire. Officer Ramirez's expression remained professional, but her voice sharpened. "Everyone needs to stop discussing this document right now." Good advice. Naturally, my family ignored it. Martin pointed at Julian. "You said the lender only needed assurance." Julian snapped. "You were the one who said Vivian could be handled." My mother made a strangled noise. "Martin," Dahlia said. "Oh my God, Dad." I sat back slowly. There are moments in a revenge story where people imagine the protagonist delivering a perfect speech. A devastating monologue. A final line that cracks the villain's soul open. But sometimes, you do not need a speech. Sometimes, you just need to let guilty people stand in sunlight with police nearby and keep talking. Officer Ramirez took the document back toward her patrol car. The younger officer remained near the group. Julian tried to follow. "Sir," the younger officer said, "stay here. I need to clarify." "Stay here." Julian stayed. The investors began leaving in earnest. Grant Ellison approached Julian only long enough to say, "You tried to sell us a headquarters you couldn't unlock." Julian's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Grant walked away. Another investor said, "You'll be hearing from counsel." A third simply shook his head and got into his car. The woman in the white blazer was the last to leave. She looked at Dahlia, then at Julian. "I hope you understand," she said, "how many people you implicated today." Then she drove away. By then, Julian looked smaller. Not physically, socially. The expensive suit no longer read as success. It read as costume. The watch looked less like wealth and more like evidence. The leased luxury car behind him, which had arrived like a symbol, now sat in the driveway like a punchline waiting for timing. And timing arrived in the form of a tow truck. At first, I thought it was another service vehicle accidentally entering the community. Then it stopped behind Julian's car. A man in a reflective vest stepped out, checked the license plate, and started lowering the tow rig. Julian turned. "What are you doing?" The driver glanced at a tablet. "Repossession order," Dahlia said. "What?" Julian moved fast, panic breaking through every polished layer. No, that's a mistake." The driver did not look impressed. "Vehicle's been flagged for weeks. GPS pinged here. I'm just doing my job." For weeks. I remembered every time Julian had pulled up to family dinners in that car. Every time my mother had admired it. Every time Dahlia had posted from the passenger seat with captions about abundance and alignment. The abundance had missed payments. The alignment had a repo order. Julian turned to the officers. "Can he do this right now?" Officer Ramirez looked toward the tow driver, then back at Julian. "If he has a valid repossession order and no breach of peace occurs, that is a civil matter. Do not interfere." Dahlia's face crumpled, but not with sadness, with humiliation. "My bag is in there," she snapped. The tow driver allowed her to retrieve it. She yanked open the passenger door, grabbed a designer purse, and slammed the door hard enough to make the younger officer glance over. "Careful," Julian said automatically. Dahlia turned on him. "Careful? Your car is being repossessed in front of investors and police at a house you told everyone we owned?" "Not now," he muttered. "Yes, now." My mother grabbed Dahlia's arm. "Sweetheart, your blood pressure." "Oh, stop," Dahlia snapped. "I'm not dying. I'm embarrassed." There it was. The truth, accidentally clean. I saved that clip too. The tow truck lifted the front of Julian's car with mechanical indifference. There is something deeply humbling about watching fake wealth get dragged backward by a man who does not care about your branding. Julian stood there, jaw tight, hands on his hips, as his car was secured. My father was speaking quietly with Officer Ramirez now. His face had gone pale. She was not arresting him, not then, but she was clearly explaining that the document would be retained or reported, that further inquiry would follow, that presenting questionable paperwork involving someone else's signature was not a family misunderstanding simply because he wanted it to be. Celeste looked 10 years older. Dahlia opened a rideshare app. I knew because she said, "I'm ordering a premium car. I am not leaving in some dirty compact." A minute later, she frowned, then tapped again, then again. "My card isn't working." Julian did not look at her. Dahlia tried another card, declined. Her face turned red. "Julian." He said nothing. "Julian, I heard you." "Why are my cards declining?" He laughed once, bitterly. "Maybe because today has not been great for liquidity." Dahlia stared at him like she might physically attack him. My mother fumbled for her own phone. "I'll call one," Celeste said, voice shaking. "I'll pay." Martin looked over sharply. "Celeste." "They need to leave," she snapped. For once, my mother was right. The officers issued a clear trespass warning. No one was to enter or remain on the property without authorization. Any future attempt could result in further action. The investors were gone. The fake event was dead. The car was being towed. The document was now a problem too large for Martin's voice to crush. One by one, my family moved toward the curb outside my open gate. Not my front door, not my patio, not my kitchen. The curb, where people without permission belonged. The rideshare arrived 16 minutes later, not premium, standard. Dahlia looked personally betrayed by the size of it. My father climbed in first, stiff with rage. Celeste followed, crying silently. Dahlia shoved herself into the back seat, clutching her purse and muttering that stress was bad for the baby. Julian got in last, after one final glance at my house. I wish I could say I felt triumph. I did, for a moment. But beneath it was something heavier. Because watching your family be humiliated is satisfying only until you remember they are your family. Then satisfaction becomes grief wearing sharper shoes. Still, I did not regret it, not for 1 second. They had come to my house to turn my life into collateral. They had brought investors, lies, forged documents, and arrogance to my front door. They had counted on my shame. Instead, they left my neighborhood in the back of a rideshare, sweating through designer clothes, while the last investors drove away with Julian's future in their rearview mirrors. The rideshare had barely left my neighborhood before my phone rang again. Celeste. I looked at her name on the screen and felt nothing at first. That worried me more than anger would have. Anger meant there was still heat in the wound, still movement, still some part of me trying to make sense of betrayal through emotion. But what I felt as my mother's name flashed across my phone was colder than anger. It was recognition. Of course she was calling, not to apologize, not to ask if I was okay, not to explain why she had sat in Julian's living room and laughed while my father held a forged document with my name on it. She was calling because consequences had arrived. And in my family, consequences were always treated like a problem Vivian was supposed to solve. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the phone rang again. Celeste, then again, then Dahlia, then Martin, then Julian. I declined none of them. I simply watched them come and go, one after another, like waves breaking against a locked door. Nathan stayed on the video call while I downloaded the police footage, saved the investor texts, exported the driveway clips, and filed everything into separate folders with timestamps. Evidence was calming. Evidence did not cry, distort, exaggerate, or demand forgiveness. Evidence simply existed. At 3:16 p.m., my secure voicemail system sent me an automated notification. New message from Celeste Calder. I almost deleted it unheard. Almost. Then the file length caught my eye. 27 minutes and 42 seconds. I stared at it. No one leaves a 27-minute voicemail on purpose unless they are confessing, threatening, or too technologically incompetent to know they are still connected. With my family, all three were possible. I forwarded the audio to Nathan before listening. Then I pressed play. At first, there was only rustling, fabric moving, a car door slamming, Dahlia's voice, sharp and furious, cutting through background traffic. I cannot believe you let that happen. Julian's voice answered, lower. I let that happen? Yes, you, your investors, your company, your stupid announcement. My announcement, Julian snapped. You were the one posing in Vivian's backyard yesterday talking about where the champagne wall should go. That was before I knew you couldn't even get inside. I told you the code would work. Martin's voice, heavy with rage, entered the recording. The code should have worked! The rideshare driver said something I could not hear clearly. Celeste whispered, "Please lower your voices. He can hear everything." Dahlia laughed, but it was ugly and panicked. "Good. Let him hear. Maybe he can invest too." Apparently, anyone with a pulse was invited. I sat back slowly. They did not know the call had connected. Celeste had pocket dialed me, or purse dialed me, or accidentally hit my name while trying to call someone else and then dropped the phone into a handbag full of tissues, receipts, and denial. Whatever had happened, my mother had given me a front row seat to the after party. Julian said, "Everyone needs to stop talking until we know what Vivian has." "She has the video," Dahlia snapped. "Obviously she has the video." "I know she has the video." "Then who took it?" Silence. Not full silence. The car hummed. A turn signal clicked. Celeste sniffled. Then Martin said, "It had to be someone in your apartment." Dahlia's voice dropped. "Maya." My body went still. Julian said, "Don't be ridiculous." "Who else?" Dahlia demanded. "The camera angle was from the bookshelf. She's always lurking around like some creepy little orphan." "She is not an orphan," Julian said, but there was no real defense in it. "She acts like one," Dahlia said. Silent, miserable, staring at everyone. "I told you she was a problem." Celeste murmured, "Dahlia, don't say things like that." "Why? Because it sounds bad?" "Everything sounds bad now." I paused the audio. For a few seconds, I could only hear my own breathing. Maya. I had suspected it. The unknown number, the warning, the quiet urgency of "please watch before the party." But suspicion was different from hearing Dahlia name her with contempt. I thought of Maya standing in my hallway the day before, backpack on one shoulder, eyes flicking toward me as if she had wanted to speak. I thought of her empty lunch account, her one-word text. "Thank you." I pressed play again. Julian's voice was tense. "Leave Maya out of this." Dahlia scoffed. "Now you're protective?" "I said, leave her out of it." "You ignore her 90% of the time unless she embarrasses you." "Dahlia." "No, don't Dahlia me. Your daughter just blew up my life." Martin cut in. "Your life? My name is on that document." Julian's tone sharpened. "Because you put it there. You asked me to help. I asked whether Vivian would cooperate. You said she would. You said you could handle her. I said she could be reasoned with." "No," Julian said. "You said she was desperate for family approval and would never risk humiliating all of you in public." That one landed quietly. Even through a recording, I felt it. Because he was not wrong. Not about who I had been, just about who I was willing to remain. Celeste started crying harder. "Please stop. Please, this is not helping." Dahlia ignored her. "What happens now?" Julian did not answer. "What happens now, Julian?" "I don't know." That was the first time I had ever heard him say those words. No buzzwords, no market language, no strategic expansion, no liquidity pathways. Just a man in a rideshare with no car, no investors, no access, and no lie sturdy enough to stand on. Martin said, "You said the bridge money would come through today. It would have if Vivian hadn't sabotaged us." "She did not sabotage us," Martin snapped. "You built the plan around a house you did not own." Julian laughed bitterly. "You signed off on the guarantor. I confirmed the signature. You forged it." "I did not forge anything." "You literally said you knew her signature." "You told me it was a draft." "A draft for a lender, Martin, not a birthday card." Celeste made a small, choking sound. The driver said, clearer this time, "Sir, ma'am, I need everyone to keep it down." Dahlia snapped, "Just drive." There was another stretch of muffled movement. Then Dahlia said something that made my hand tighten around the phone. I only agreed to the party because you said the investor money would clear before the baby came, Julian answered. And it would have. No, you promised me we were fine. You promised me the cards were temporary. You promised me the car thing was a mistake. The car thing was a cash flow issue. The car thing was a tow truck in front of police. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because Dahlia had a talent for finding the shallowest part of any disaster and drowning in it. Martin's voice turned hard. We need to focus. Vivian is the problem. There it was, the old family compass, spinning wildly until it found me. Celeste whispered, Your father is right. We need to talk to her calmly. No, Martin said. Calmly is over. She humiliated us. She humiliated this family in front of strangers. She made me look like a criminal. Julian muttered. That was the document. What did you say? Nothing. Martin continued. We go to her office Monday. My eyes narrowed. Celeste said, Martin, no. Yes. She hides behind lawyers and cameras at that house. Fine. We go where she cannot hide, her office, her employees, her glass walls, and little assistants. She will not let us make a scene in front of her staff. Dahlia sniffed. She cares more about reputation than anything. Julian said, That is true. My mother, crying softly, said, She will have to listen if we are there in person. I paused the recording again. For a moment, I stared past the laptop screen at the resort garden outside my window. There it was. Their next move. Not apology, not reflection, not fear. Strategy. They had been removed from my house, so they would come to my workplace. They would try to drag the private family script into the professional world I had built precisely to escape them. Martin would use volume. Celeste would use tears. Dahlia would use pregnancy. Julian would use whatever pieces of confidence he still had left. They believed my office was my weakness. They had no idea it was my battlefield. I resumed the recording long enough to hear Martin say, Monday morning, no warning. We walk in together. Celeste said, Maybe Vivian will have calmed down by then. Dahlia muttered, She better have. Julian said nothing. The rest of the voicemail dissolved into overlapping blame. Dahlia accused Julian of ruining her future. Julian accused Martin of making promises he could not keep. Martin accused Julian of dragging him into a financial mess. Celeste cried that everyone was tearing the family apart while refusing somehow to name the people who had actually done it. By the end, the audio became muffled, then silent. The call finally disconnected. I sent one message to Nathan. They are coming to my office Monday. He replied almost immediately. Good. We prepare the room. That was one of the reasons Nathan and I worked well together. He did not ask whether I wanted to avoid the confrontation. He understood that some confrontations are not chased. They are received. I left the resort early Sunday morning and returned home after confirming the property was clear. The house felt different when I walked in, not contaminated exactly, but awake, like it had witnessed something with me and was waiting to see what I would do next. I spent Sunday building the file, not just emotionally, professionally. First, the voicemail. I had it transcribed, timestamped, backed up, and sent to Nathan. Then the investor communications. Grant Ellison's texts, the screenshots of Julian's announcement language, the footage of the failed entry attempts, the police interaction, the document Martin had produced, Nathan's notes about potential lender exposure. Then I called my forensic accountant, Priya Singh. Priya had been with my firm for 3 years as an outside specialist, and she had the unsettling gift of finding financial rot behind polished decks. I gave her Julian's company name, public filings, investor materials we had collected, and every document Nathan could legally share. By Sunday evening, she had found enough smoke to suggest the fire had been burning for months. Delayed redemptions, circular payments, marketing language that did not match operational capacity, executive expenses categorized as growth initiatives, investor distributions that looked suspiciously dependent on incoming funds. Nothing I would say publicly yet. Everything I wanted in a binder, a physical binder. People underestimate paper now. They think power lives in screens, links, drives, dashboards, and often it does. But there is a special kind of psychological violence in a thick black binder placed on a conference table in front of a man who thought his lies were too complicated to summarize. So I printed emails, charts, timelines, screenshots, access logs, corporate filings, debt summaries, the transcript of the accidental voicemail, still images from the video, a copy of the police incident number, a clean property ownership packet, a legal memo from Nathan. By midnight, the binder was 4 inches thick. I labeled it simply Mercer Digital Exposure Summary. Then I emailed Iris Bell. Iris was my front desk manager, though that title did not do her justice. Iris was 31, poised, beautiful in a way that made people underestimate her exactly once, and capable of making a hostile billionaire feel underdressed with one polite sentence. I wrote, "My family may arrive Monday morning without an appointment. If they do not engage beyond standard reception protocol. Alert building security. Let them know I will see them in conference room A. Do not allow them beyond reception until I come out." Iris replied at 12:08 a.m. Understood. Do you want them removed if they become loud? I typed, not immediately. Let them be visible. Her response came 30 seconds later. Also understood. I smiled for the first time that weekend. Not happily. Precisely. Conference room A sat in the center of our office, framed in glass on 3 sides, soundproof but visible to the whole floor. Clients loved it because it looked transparent and powerful. I loved it because people behaved differently when they knew they could be seen but not heard. My family thrived in private, in kitchens, in cars, in living rooms, in whispered calls where they could rewrite reality one emotional accusation at a time. So I chose a room where their words would be contained, but their faces would not. Their anger would be visible, their gestures would be visible, their collapse would be visible. But my staff would not hear a single word unless I chose to tell them. That was not cruelty. That was containment. At 2:11 a.m., I finally closed the binder and stood in my office at home, hands resting on the cover. I should have felt ready. Instead, I felt tired in a place sleep could not reach. Because Monday would not just be a confrontation. It would be the formal end of something I had been ending quietly for years. I was not afraid of Julian. I was not afraid of Dahlia. I was not even afraid of my father anymore. What kept me awake was the knowledge that by the time they left my office, I would no longer be their daughter in any meaningful sense. Maybe I had not been for a long time. Maybe I was only finally admitting it. I turned off the lights just before 3. They thought they were coming to my office to corner me. I spent Sunday night building the room where they would corner themselves. Monday morning arrived dressed like any other workday. That felt insulting somehow. The sky was clear. The city moved under a clean blue light. Elevators opened and closed. People carried coffee, answered emails, checked calendars, complained about traffic. Nothing in the world seemed aware that my family was about to walk into the office I had built from the wreckage they left me and demand that I save them from consequences they had handcrafted. I arrived at Calder Strategic Communications at 7:15 a.m. Too early, but I had not really slept. Our office occupied the 23rd floor of a glass tower downtown, with a reception area that looked calm enough to sell silence. Pale stone floors, low cream sofas, a wall of living greenery behind the front desk, the company name in brushed brass letters. Calder Strategic Communications. I remembered the day that sign went up. I had stood in the empty reception area while the installers adjusted the letters, and I had felt something I could not name at the time. Not happiness exactly, more like proof. Proof that my name could exist somewhere without being attached to obligation, guilt, or family debt. Now, years later, my father was planning to storm through that same reception area because he still believed my name belonged to him. I carried the black binder myself, not because I did not trust anyone else, because some things you should feel the weight of. Mercer Digital. Exposure summary. 4 inches thick, heavy, cleanly tabbed, beautiful in the way only organized destruction can be beautiful. Iris was already at her desk when I arrived. She looked up from her monitor, immaculate in a charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, expression calm. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." Building security has been briefed. 2 officers are stationed near the elevator bank. They will not approach unless I signal or unless someone becomes physically aggressive. Perfect. Conference room A is ready. Water only. No coffee. No glassware except the table pitcher. No sharp letter openers. Because I know families. Despite myself, I smiled. Iris's eyes softened for half a second. "Are you okay?" That question again. So simple. So unfamiliar from people who shared my blood. "I will be." She nodded, accepting the answer without trying to decorate it. By 8 o'clock, the office began filling. My employees arrived with laptops and iced coffees, greeting me the way they always did. A few looked at the binder, none asked. My team knew discretion the way surgeons knew sterilization. You did not work at my firm long if curiosity outranked judgment. At 8:45, Nathan arrived. He wore a dark suit, no tie, and the expression of a man prepared to ruin someone's morning politely. He carried a slim leather folio, which meant everything truly dangerous was already memorized. "Any word from them?" he asked. "Nothing. They'll come." "I know." He looked toward conference room A. "You still want the glass room?" "Yes." "You understand the room is visible." "That's the point." Nathan studied me for a moment. "Soundproof but visible. They want privacy because privacy lets them rewrite reality. I'm giving them silence without secrecy." He almost smiled. "That is a sentence you should not say to a jury." "I'll save it for memoirs." At 9:27, Iris's desk phone lit up. She answered. "Good morning, Calder Strategic Communications." A pause. Her posture changed by maybe 1 degree. "Yes, Mr. Calder. Miss Calder is in the office. Does she have an appointment with you?" Another pause. "I understand you are her father. She still does not take unscheduled meetings." I watched through the glass wall of my office as the elevator doors opened. Martin stepped out first. Of course he did. He wore a navy blazer and the face of a man arriving to collect obedience. Celeste followed, clutching her purse with both hands, eyes red but makeup perfect. Dahlia came next in a pale blue maternity dress, one hand resting on her stomach, her expression arranged somewhere between suffering and accusation. Julian was last. He looked terrible. Not messy. Julian would never allow messy. But the polish had thinned. His suit was still expensive, but it sat wrong on him now. His jaw looked tight. His eyes were shadowed. The man who had walked into my driveway like a founder announcing an empire now looked like a defendant who had not yet accepted the title. Iris stood. "Good morning," she said, voice smooth enough to cut glass. "How may I assist you?" Martin did not slow down. "We're here to see Vivian." As I said on the phone, Miss Calder does not take unscheduled meetings. "I am her father." "Yes," Iris said. "You mentioned that." It was such a perfect sentence that I nearly applauded. Martin's face darkened. "Young lady, I don't know who you think you are, but—" "Iris Bell," she said pleasantly, "front office manager, and you are currently in a secured corporate office." Celeste touched Martin's arm. "Martin, don't." Dahlia looked around the reception area with open resentment. Of course, she has a receptionist trained like a guard dog. Iris's expression did not change. Julian stepped forward, trying to recover some version of charm. "We just need 5 minutes with Vivian. This is a family matter." I opened my office door. "No," I said. "It isn't." Every head turned. For one brief, satisfying second, none of them spoke. I walked toward them slowly, the black binder held at my side. Nathan stepped out behind me. My father's eyes went to him first. "Why is he here?" "Because you forged my name." Celeste inhaled sharply. "Vivian!" I looked at her. "Not here." Then I turned to Iris. "Conference room A." Iris nodded. Building security became visible near the elevator bank. Not approaching, just present. Dahlia noticed immediately. "You called security on your pregnant sister?" "I notified security about people involved in fraud entering my office." Her mouth opened. No sound came out. That was new for her. I led them down the hall. Conference room A sat in the center of the main floor like a glass box. On most days, it was where we met with CEOs, legal teams, public figures, and the occasional celebrity whose assistant had used the word urgent too casually. The walls were clear from waist to ceiling. Inside, no one could hear you from the outside. Outside, everyone could see you. My employees did not stare. They were too disciplined for that. But they saw. They saw Martin's stiff anger, Celeste's trembling mouth, Dahlia's theatrical hand on her stomach, Julian's tense jaw, Nathan's calm, my binder. They saw the shape of the meeting before anyone said a word. I opened the conference room door. "Inside." Martin bristled. "You don't order me around." I looked at him. "Then leave." He entered. They all did. Nathan closed the glass door behind us. The room sealed with a soft click. For a moment, silence settled. I placed the binder on the table in front of my chair, but I did not sit. Nathan stood slightly behind me near the wall, folio closed, posture relaxed. My family remained standing too, as if sitting would imply they were guests rather than invaders. Celeste broke first. "Vivian, this has gone far enough." There it was. Not, "I'm sorry," not "what we did was wrong," not, "Are you all right?" This has gone far enough. I looked at her with genuine curiosity. "Which part?" Her face tightened. "Do not be cruel." "Which part has gone too far, Mom? The forged signature? The fake acquisition? The police report? The repossessed car? The investor complaints? Or the fact that I did not open my front door and serve appetizers during it?" Dahlia made a wounded sound. "You humiliated us. You came to my house to commit fraud in daylight. I am pregnant and still responsible for your choices." Celeste stepped closer, tears gathering. A real sister would not have left Dahlia standing outside in that heat. The gate was open. Her car was available until it was repossessed. Other cars were available, Rideshare was available, water was available, shade was available, emergency services were offered. She chose to stay because she wanted access to my house. Dahlia's eyes flashed. You were watching us? Yes. That answer landed harder than I expected. Maybe because manipulators hate surveillance when they are used to operating in shadows. Martin slammed his palm on the table. Several employees looked over through the glass. He noticed. His hand curled into a fist, but he lowered his voice. You think this office makes you powerful? No, I said. The work I do here makes me powerful. The office is just where I invoice people for forgetting that. Julian scoffed. That's cute. I turned to him. Finally, he had been trying to look bored, but fear kept interrupting. I lifted the binder and slid it across the table until it stopped in front of him. Let's talk about your company. His eyes dropped to the label. Mercer Digital, Exposure Summary. For the first time since I had known him, Julian Mercer did not immediately speak. Dahlia frowned. What is that? Your husband's problem. Julian pushed the binder back an inch with 2 fingers. I don't know what you think you have. Enough. Nathan moved then, opening his folio. I sat at the head of the table. Slowly, the others sat too. Martin first, because he needed to look in control. Celeste beside him. Dahlia beside Julian, though she angled her chair slightly away from him. Interesting. I opened the binder to the first tab. Mercer Digital has no viable product at commercial scale, I said. Your investor materials suggest otherwise. Julian laughed. You don't understand the technology. That was your favorite defense. Yes. I turned a page. Revenue reports from Q2 and Q3 appear to include projected commitments represented as realized inflows. Several investor updates use the phrase secured institutional pipeline, but the named institutions either do not appear in your bank activity or appear only as preliminary conversations. Julian's smile faded. I continued. Investor funds were used for personal expenses categorized as growth initiatives, luxury vehicle payments, private club dues, travel, Dahlia's brand consultant. At least 2 designer purchases coded as executive relationship development. Dahlia's head snapped toward Julian. What designer purchases? He did not look at her. I turned another page. 3 early investors received distributions within 72 hours of new investor deposits, despite no operating revenue sufficient to support those payments. Martin shifted. He understood that one. Even people who do not understand crypto understand old money paying older money with new money. Julian leaned forward. You have no right to access private company information. I have the right to defend myself from a fraud scheme that used my property, my LLC, and my forged signature. Nathan added, information came from publicly available filings, investor-provided materials, communications voluntarily shared with Ms. Calder, and documentation related to the attempted use of her property. We are comfortable with our sources. Julian looked at him with hatred. Nathan looked back with billable calm. I turned to the next tab. Your company owes approximately $1.5 million across private lenders, early investors, and short-term obligations. That does not include pending legal exposure. You needed emergency bridge financing, and you needed investors to believe Mercer Digital was expanding rather than collapsing. Julian's throat moved. So, I said, you chose my house. Celeste whispered. Vivian, maybe he made mistakes, but I did not look at her. Not mistakes, strategy. I pulled out a printed still from the video and placed it on the table. Julian leaning forward in his living room, wine glass beside him, mouth open mid-sentence. You plan to announce that Mercer Digital had acquired my estate as an executive headquarters and private retreat. Another still. Dahlia laughing. You plan to do it in front of investors because you believed I would be too embarrassed to contradict you publicly? Another still. Martin holding the document. And you plan to use a forged guarantor draft as backup collateral for bridge financing? Martin's voice came out harsh. I did not forge anything. I looked at him. The room went quiet. Dad, he flinched. Not because I raised my voice, because I did not. You submitted a document bearing my signature. I did not sign it. You admitted on video that you knew my signature. You attempted to use my name and my LLC to support Julian's debt. His face hardened. I was trying to help this family. No, you were trying to sacrifice me for Dahlia again. Dahlia recoiled. Leave me out of this. I turned to her. You were in the room. I didn't understand all the financial stuff, but you understood the part where you called me lonely, childless, and desperate. Celeste closed her eyes. Dahlia looked away. Julian seized the opening. This is personal. That's all this is? You've always hated that Dahlia had a life outside work. You hate that she has a husband and a baby coming because it reminds you that all your money cannot buy a family. There it was. The old script dressed in a newer suit. For a second, the room blurred around the edges, not because his words were true, because they were familiar. Then I looked through the glass wall and saw my office, my employees, my company, people who worked hard because I paid them well and treated them fairly, people who trusted me, people whose mortgages, children, medical bills, and futures were supported by the stability of the business I had built. That was my life. Not empty, not sad, not lesser, mine. I looked back at Julian. You're not qualified to define family. You used your daughter, your wife, your investors, and my parents as shields for a collapsing fraud. His face twisted. You fabricated this binder. I slid a confirmation receipt across the table. Evidence submitted through counsel. Investor complaint supplement. Federal fraud tip confirmation. Property fraud report. Police incident number. Time-stamped video preservation. Julian picked up the page. His hand was not steady. That did something to Dahlia. I saw it happen. Until that moment, she had still believed there was a way for Julian to charm himself out. A way for my father to bully the room. A way for my mother to cry until I softened. But Julian's shaking hand told her something none of my words could. The money was gone. The protection was gone. The fantasy was gone. And Dahlia Mercer had never loved anyone enough to stay once the fantasy left. Martin, however, was slower to adapt. He pushed his chair back and stood. Enough, he said. I leaned back. He pointed at me. You are going to stop this. You are going to call whoever needs to be called. You are going to withdraw these complaints, tell the investors this was a family misunderstanding, and wire enough money to stabilize the situation. Nathan's eyebrows lifted slightly. I almost admired the audacity. Almost. Wire money? I asked. Yes, Martin snapped. Family protects family. No, family forged my signature. His face reddened. Do not speak to me like I am some criminal. You involved my LLC in fraudulent loan documents. To help your sister. There it is. The room stilled again. Martin seemed not to understand what he had admitted, but Nathan did. Julian did. Even Celeste did. I stood slowly. For 16 years, I wondered if you ever regretted it. My father frowned. Regretted what? My college fund. Dahlia made an impatient sound. Oh my God, are we doing this again? I looked at her. Yes. Then I looked back at my father. I was 18. I saved $40,000. Tutoring, summer jobs, scholarships, weekend shifts. That money was my way out. Dahlia drove drunk, crashed your car into a bakery, hurt people, and created a lawsuit. You and Mom emptied my account to settle it. Celeste whispered. Vivian, that was a long time ago. It was my future. You were smart, Martin said. You figured it out. The sentence landed exactly where it had landed the first time, but this time, I was not 18. This time, I had glass walls, legal counsel, a 4-inch binder, and no remaining need to be chosen by people who had already shown me their price. Yes, I said. I did. Martin's eyes narrowed. You taught me I could survive without this family. Today, I'm proving you right. No one spoke. Outside the glass, the office continued moving quietly. Phones rang. Employees crossed the floor. Work continued. My life continued. Martin looked smaller standing there. Not sorry. Just exposed. Dahlia began to cry then, but even her tears seemed confused, as if they had arrived expecting an audience more sympathetic than the room provided. Celeste reached for my hand across the table. I moved mine before she could touch me. Her face crumpled. For 1 second, I felt the old ache. Then the conference room door opened. No one had knocked. I turned. A girl stood in the doorway wearing a Navy school uniform, white sneakers, and a backpack hanging from one shoulder. Maya Mercer. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. Julian shot to his feet. Maya, why aren't you at school? She did not look at him. She looked at Dahlia, then at me. Then she said clearly enough for every person in that soundproof room to hear, Dahlia is lying. She always lies. For a second, no one moved. Maya stood in the doorway of the glass conference room with her backpack hanging from one shoulder, her school uniform slightly wrinkled, her face pale but determined. She looked too young to be standing in the middle of a room full of adults who had built entire lives out of lying, and yet, somehow, she was the only person there who seemed completely finished with pretending. Julian was the first to recover. Maya, he said sharply, why are you not at school? She did not answer him. That was when I saw real fear cross his face. Not fear of police, not fear of investors, not even fear of prison. This was smaller, uglier, and more personal. The fear of a man realizing the quiet child he had ignored had been listening the entire time. Dahlia pushed herself up from her chair. What is she doing here? Maya looked at her. The room changed. I had seen Maya quiet before. I had seen her polite, watchful, careful. But this was different. Her silence was no longer submission. It was restraint. Nathan moved slightly, positioning himself where he could see both Maya and Julian. I said gently, Maya, come in. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Through the glass walls, I saw Iris pause near reception. She did not interfere, but she watched. So did building security. Julian took one step toward Maya. Maya, this is not your business. She finally looked at him. I live in your apartment, she said. I think that makes it my business. His jaw tightened. You are a child. I know. You remind me every time you don't want me to have an opinion. Dahlia let out a humorless laugh. Oh, this is ridiculous. Vivian, did you put her up to this? No, Maya said before I could respond. She didn't even know I was coming. Celeste looked confused and frightened. Maya, sweetheart, what are you talking about? Maya's mouth tightened at sweetheart, as if the word tasted fake. I sent the video. The room went still again. Dahlia's face lost color. Julian closed his eyes for half a second. Martin stared at her as if she had spoken another language. I did not speak. I did not want to interrupt her, and I did not want anyone later claiming I had fed her words. Maya shifted her backpack higher on her shoulder. I sent Aunt Vivian the video from Julian's apartment. I used an old motion camera I bought online. It was hidden on the bookshelf. Dahlia's voice rose. You little... Careful, Nathan said. One word, flat, quiet. Dahlia stopped. Maya's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. I didn't set it up because of the company stuff, she said. I didn't know about all of that at first. I set it up because Dahlia kept taking my things and then telling everyone I was lying. Dahlia scoffed. Oh my God. Maya turned to her fully. My cash from my birthday card disappeared. You said I probably lost it. My necklace from my mom disappeared. You said it looked cheap anyway. My skincare disappeared, and then I saw it in your bathroom drawer. When I asked for it back, you told Dad I was being aggressive. Julian's face tightened, but he did not look surprised. That told me enough. Maya continued, voice trembling now but not breaking. You took my hair products and then told me my hair looked messy because I didn't know how to take care of myself. You told me I should be grateful you were even nice to me because most women wouldn't want their husband's leftover baggage around. My mother made a soft, horrified sound. Dahlia snapped, I never said that. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. Yes, you did. Dahlia froze. Maya did not play anything yet. She just held the phone. That was more powerful, because everyone in the room understood she had proof. Julian rubbed one hand over his mouth. Maya, we can talk about this at home. No, she said. We can't. His hand dropped. Maya looked at him, and for the first time I heard the child beneath the composure. I tried. Julian said nothing. I tried when she took my money. I tried when she called me names. I tried when she said the new baby was your real family now. I tried when she told me not to eat so much because people would think you couldn't afford to feed both of your kids. Dahlia said, that is completely out of context. Maya laughed once. It was not a child's laugh. It was exhausted. What context makes that better? No one answered. Through the glass, I saw a few employees slow their steps. They could not hear anything, but they could see Dahlia's face, Julian's posture, my stillness, Maya standing alone by the end of the table, small and straight and shaking only in her hands. I stood. Not quickly. I did not want to startle her. Maya, I said softly, you don't have to say more than you want to. She looked at me then. Her eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. I do, she said, because they'll lie if I don't. That sentence entered me like a key turning in a lock. They'll lie if I don't. How many times had I felt that and stayed silent anyway? How many times had I let the family story stand because correcting it cost too much? Maya was 16, and she was already tired of paying. She looked back at Julian. You never believed me. His voice softened finally. Too late. Maya, no, don't do that now. She swallowed. When I told you Dahlia was taking my things, you said I was jealous because she was pregnant. When I told you she called me baggage, you said she was hormonal. When I told you I hated being home, you said I was dramatic like my mother. Julian flinched. Could. Maya continued. So I bought the camera. I thought I would catch her taking something. I thought maybe if you saw it, you would finally believe me. She looked down at the phone in her hand. But then I heard them talking about Aunt Vivian's house, the party, the investors, the fake headquarters, the signature. She turned to me. I didn't know what all of it meant, but I knew it was bad, and I knew they were laughing at you. A tear slipped down her cheek then, just one. I'm sorry I didn't send it sooner. My chest tightened. The apology was so wrong, so misplaced that for a second I could barely breathe. Maya, I said. You saved me. Her face crumpled slightly. Then she looked away, as if being thanked hurt more than being ignored. Dahlia folded her arms. This is insane. Everyone is acting like I abused her because a teenager is mad I borrowed moisturizer. Maya's head lifted. You told me my mom left because I was too difficult to love. The room went dead silent. Even Nathan's expression changed. Julian whispered, Dahlia. Dahlia looked cornered now. I was angry. Maya stared at her. I was 14. Celeste covered her mouth. Martin looked away. That was my family's specialty. They could stare directly at money, status, and opportunity, but pain made them suddenly fascinated by walls. Dahlia tried again, weaker this time. You don't understand what pregnancy hormones do. Maya's voice became very quiet. You were cruel before you were pregnant. There was no comeback for that, not even from Dahlia. Julian stood abruptly. That's enough, he said. No, I said. It isn't. He turned on me. You have no right to insert yourself into my relationship with my daughter. Maya spoke before I could. She was more of a parent to me than you were. Julian's face hardened. For 1 second, I saw the mask drop completely. Not the charming founder, not the polished husband, not the overwhelmed father. Just a man, furious at being exposed by someone he considered too powerless to matter. He moved toward Maya. Fast. Not running, not lunging, but fast enough. Maya stepped back. I did not have to say a word. The conference room door opened immediately. Building security entered. 2 men, calm and professional, placed themselves between Julian and Maya before he got within 3 feet of her. Julian snapped, Get your hands off me! They haven't touched you, Nathan said. Yet. Julian looked around the room, realizing everyone had seen him move toward his own daughter in anger, through glass, in a corporate office, after being accused of fraud. Men like Julian love optics until optics tell the truth. Maya moved closer to me without seeming to realize she had done it. That small movement broke something in me, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely, because I knew what it meant to move toward the safest adult in the room and hope they did not step away. I did not step away. I put one hand lightly on the back of the chair beside me, leaving space. Not grabbing her, not claiming her, just making it clear she could stand there. She did. Nathan opened his folio. Julian, he said, since Maya is here, this is an appropriate moment to inform you that emergency filings were submitted this morning regarding temporary guardianship. Julian froze. Dahlia said, What? Maya looked at me startled. I kept my voice calm. We were going to tell you privately after the initial hearing. Her lips parted. You did that? With Nathan's help. Julian tried to shove past security. This time they did put hands on him. You filed for custody of my daughter? Temporary emergency guardianship, Nathan corrected. Not custody. Not adoption, not yet. The petition is based on documented parental neglect, financial instability, the ongoing fraud investigation, evidence of emotional abuse in the home, and Maya's own statements. Julian's face went red. You have no standing. Nathan's voice remained even. That will be decided by a judge. Dahlia laughed in disbelief. A judge is not going to hand Vivian a child because Maya is dramatic. Maya said, I asked for it. Dahlia stopped laughing. I turned to Maya. You didn't have to say that here. I know. Julian stared at her. What did you just say? Maya's hands shook harder, but her voice stayed clear. I asked Aunt Vivian for help. When? Julian demanded. Last month. That hit him harder than anything else, because last month meant before the house, before the police, before the investors, before the public collapse. This was not opportunism. This was a child quietly planning an escape while every adult in her home ignored the smoke. I texted her, Maya said. I told her I couldn't keep living like that. She didn't tell me to run away. She didn't tell me to lie. She told me to document everything, talk to my school counselor, and not put myself in danger. Nathan added, which is exactly what she did. Julian looked at me with hatred so pure it almost warmed the room. You've been poisoning her against me. No, I said. You left her alone with people who made kindness look like poisoning. Dahlia's face twisted. Oh, please. Vivian sent you lunch money a few times and now you think she's Mother Teresa? Maya turned to her. She noticed I was hungry. 6 words. That was all. 6 words, and Dahlia looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Maya continued. She noticed my textbooks were missing. She noticed when my shoes were too small. She remembered my birthday. She didn't make me beg. She didn't make me prove I deserved help. She just helped. I could not look at Celeste then, because I knew if I did, I might see something like shame on my mother's face, and I did not want to care. But I looked anyway. There was shame. There was also resentment, because Celeste could feel the story shifting away from her control. Maya was not just evidence, she was a witness to the kind of woman Vivian had become without their permission. Julian's voice cracked with anger. I am her father. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Then why did she believe me before I had proof? No one spoke. That was the real indictment, not the legal petition, not the camera, not even the testimony. The real indictment was that a 16-year-old girl had needed proof to be believed by her own father, and the only adult who believed her first was the woman her family called cold. Julian seemed to deflate and ignite at the same time. He looked toward Dahlia. Maybe he expected support. Maybe he expected his wife to defend him, to stand beside him, to say Maya was lying and Vivian was manipulative, and all of this was unfair. Dahlia took one step away from him. It was small, but everyone saw it. Julian saw it most of all. His eyes narrowed. Really? Dahlia lifted her chin. You told me she was just difficult. Maya laughed again, bitter and quiet. You believed that because it was convenient. Dahlia glared at her. Don't talk to me like you're grown. Maya's voice sharpened for the first time. Then stop making children clean up adult lies. That sentence ended the room. There are lines that do not need volume because they carry their own weight. Maya's landed on the conference table, on the binder, on the forged documents, on the years of theft and silence and excuses, and nothing in the room could move around it. Security still held Julian back. Dahlia stood apart from him now. Celeste cried silently. Martin stared at the ruined family hierarchy, like he could not understand how a child and the daughter he dismissed had become the only stable people in the room. I looked at Maya. Are you safe right now? I asked. She nodded once. My school counselor knows I'm here. So does Nathan. Of course Nathan knew. I glanced at him. He gave a slight nod. Efficient, ruthless, humane. That was Nathan. I turned back to Maya. You can sit if you want. She shook her head. I want to stand. So she stood. Beside me. Not behind me. Beside me. Julian looked at the two of us and finally understood what had happened. He had not just lost investors. He had not just lost the car. He had not just lost the lie. He was losing the one person in his home who had still wanted him to become better. And Dahlia, seeing the collapse coming, made her choice. She looked at Julian with disgust and stepped farther away from him. By the time the security officers guided him back against the wall, He was no longer looking at me. He was looking at his wife, waiting for loyalty. But Dahlia had already begun calculating what it would cost to stay. Dahlia had always been loyal to comfort. Not people, not principles, not family. Comfort. She could love anyone who gave her a soft place to land, a pretty story to tell, and someone else to blame when the floor disappeared. For years, that had been my parents. Then it became Julian. His watches, his leased cars, his investor dinners, his big words, his promises of generational wealth. Dahlia had wrapped herself in his performance so completely that she had mistaken the costume for protection. But now, the costume was tearing in public. No investors, no car, no headquarters, no money, no control over Maya. No guarantee that law enforcement would look at Julian and see anything other than a fraud case wearing a navy suit. And Dahlia Mercer, golden child of the Calder family, was not built to stand beside a sinking man unless she could use him as a flotation device. She took another step away from Julian. It was small, almost delicate, but in that glass conference room, it sounded like a door closing. Julian stared at her. "Are you serious?" Dahlia folded one arm under her stomach. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like this is my fault." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Security still stood close enough to stop him if he moved toward Maya again, and that made his anger look even more pathetic. "You were in every conversation. I did not know you were running some fake company." His eyes widened. "Fake company?" "Yes, Julian. Fake." Her voice sharpened with every word as if volume could separate her from the evidence. No product, no money, no car, no headquarters, no investors. What exactly was real? "The debt," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. Dahlia's face flickered. Julian's did too, but with hatred. I opened the binder to a later tab and turned one page. "That part is real." Nathan gave me a brief look, not warning me to stop, just tracking the escalation. I continued. Approximately $1.5 million in known obligations, excluding legal exposure. Private lenders, early investors, short-term notes, delayed redemptions, vendor invoices. And that number may be conservative. Dahlia looked at Julian. 1.5 million? He said nothing. 1.5 million? She repeated louder. Julian's mouth tightened. "You liked the lifestyle." "I liked the lifestyle you told me you could afford." "You wanted the title. You wanted the photos. You wanted to be introduced as co-founder at events you didn't understand." Dahlia's expression shifted so fast it was almost comical. "Excuse me? You heard me? You told people I was co-founder. You asked me to." "I asked because you said it made us look more powerful as a couple." "No," Julian said. "You asked because Vivian had a company and you wanted one too." Dahlia flinched like he had slapped her. There it was, the oldest infection in the room. Me. My existence had always been treated as an insult to Dahlia. If I earned something, she deserved something prettier. If I built something, she needed a title. If I bought a house, she needed to turn it into a pregnancy stage. If I had a company, she needed to be called co-founder of one she could not explain. Martin slammed a hand on the table again. "Enough. This is not helping." "No," Julian snapped. "Let her understand what she signed." Dahlia went still. "What did you just say?" Julian smiled then. It was ugly, desperate, and mean. "You wanted equity. You wanted access. You wanted to be listed as a founding partner on investor materials. So you signed documents." Dahlia's voice dropped. "What documents?" "Personal guarantees tied to company obligations." The room changed again. Dahlia looked at Nathan as if he might save her from the sentence. Nathan did not. I said, "Marriage alone would not make you liable for Julian's company debt, but signing as a guarantor or equity partner can create exposure." "I didn't read those," Dahlia whispered. Julian laughed once. "No, you signed them next to a champagne tower at the Amara launch dinner because you were too busy asking whether the photographer got your left side." Dahlia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in her life, maybe ever, crying could not rewrite the contract. "You tricked me," she said. "You begged to be part of it. You told me it was symbolic. You heard what you wanted to hear." Dahlia's face twisted. "I am pregnant with your child." Julian's expression hardened, and then Dahlia made the mistake desperate people make when they believe shock can replace strategy. Maybe. Silence fell so suddenly it felt physical. Julian stared at her. Celeste whispered, "Dahlia." Martin closed his eyes. I did not move. Maya stood beside me, her face pale, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack. Julian's voice came out low. "What did you say?" Dahlia lifted her chin, but even she seemed to realize she had stepped into deeper water. "I said, maybe." "Maybe what?" "Maybe it's yours." Celeste made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a sob, not a gasp, something smaller and more broken. Dahlia's eyes flashed with panic and defiance. "Don't look at me like that. You lied to me for months." Julian looked like the floor had vanished under him. "Who?" Dahlia said nothing. "Who, Dahlia?" Her mouth trembled. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Oh, now paternity matters. Maya mattered and you ignored her. Your investors mattered and you robbed them. Vivian's house mattered and you tried to steal it. But suddenly you care about family?" "That is not an answer." Dahlia folded her arms protectively over her stomach. "My trainer." The words sat on the table like another forged document. I had known Dahlia was reckless. I had not known she was this self-destructive. Julian took one step forward. Security shifted. He stopped, breathing hard. "My trainer?" he repeated. Dahlia looked away. Maya whispered, "Of course." Dahlia whipped toward her. "Do not." Maya's voice was quiet. "You used to tell me loyalty was why Dad picked you." Dahlia's face crumpled with rage. "Stay out of adult conversations." "You keep saying that," Maya said, "but adults keep making me evidence." That shut her up. For a moment. Celeste sank into a chair as if her bones had been cut. Her perfect daughter stood exposed in front of her, cruel to Maya, complicit in fraud, financially liable, possibly lying about her baby's father, and still somehow trying to wear victimhood like couture. But Celeste did not fully turn on Dahlia. Not really. People like my mother do not abandon illusions because the truth arrives. They bargain with the truth. They trim it, they rename it. They look for someone else to blame for making the truth visible. Her eyes found me. "You did this," she said. I almost admired the instinct. Not Julian, who built the fraud. Not Martin, who handled my signature. Not Dahlia, who participated and cheated and lied. Me, because I had refused to stay quiet. "No," I said. "I documented it." Celeste's face twisted. "You could have handled this privately." "You mean hidden it?" "I mean, protected us." "From what?" "The consequences of crimes you helped plan?" Her lips trembled. "You are so cold." That word again. Cold. It had followed me my entire life. Cold because I did not cry on command. Cold because I remembered facts. Cold because I did not confuse panic with remorse. Cold because I had learned to survive without melting every time someone needed my boundaries to disappear. Before I could answer, Martin spoke. "Vivian has always loved punishment." I turned to him slowly. He was standing now, one hand pressed to the table, his face red, hair slightly damp at the temples. He looked older than he had at my house, smaller too, though rage was doing its best to inflate him. "You sit there with your binder and your lawyer and your glass walls," he said, "pretending this is justice. But you are enjoying it." I did not deny it immediately. That made the room uncomfortable, because there was a piece of truth there, not in the way he meant. I did not enjoy Maya's pain. I did not enjoy watching Celeste break. I did not enjoy the knowledge that the people who made me were capable of using me like collateral. But did I enjoy seeing the lies finally fail? Yes, I had earned that. "I am enjoying one thing," I said. "The fact that none of you can make me pay for this." Martin's mouth tightened. Then Celeste said the sentence that changed everything. "We'll lose the house." Everyone turned toward her. Martin went completely still. Dahlia frowned. "What?" Celeste's hands shook around her purse strap. "Martin." "Be quiet," he said. "No," she whispered. "No, I can't. You keep saying Vivian has to fix it, but she doesn't know." I looked at my father. "What don't I know?" Martin's jaw worked. Celeste's voice cracked. "The bank has started foreclosure proceedings." Dahlia blinked. "What bank?" "Our house," Celeste said, and now she was crying for real, not performing, not softly arranging tears for effect, crying like a woman who had just opened her hands and found ashes. "Your father took out a second mortgage." The words were almost anticlimactic. A second mortgage. Such a normal phrase for a family detonation. Martin snapped, "I said, be quiet." Celeste looked at him with sudden fury. "No, Martin, you be quiet. You said Julian's company was the opportunity Vivian was too arrogant to see. You said we would double the money before the baby came. You said you were tired of Vivian thinking she was the only smart person in this family." Dahlia stared at Julian. "You took money from my parents?" Julian said. "Martin invested." "How much?" I asked. No one answered. Nathan's pen hovered over his legal pad. "How much?" I repeated. Celeste whispered, 500,000. The number did not shock me as much as it should have. Maybe because, by then, I understood the shape of the disaster. Men like Martin did not simply participate in fraud out of love. Pride needed a return on investment. "He took a high-interest second mortgage 8 months ago," Celeste said. "The payments are overdue. There are penalties, letters, calls. I didn't know how bad it was until last week." Last week, before the party, before the forged document, before my house became Julian's imaginary headquarters. Suddenly, the plan sharpened into something even uglier. Julian needed investor money to keep Mercer Digital alive. Martin needed Julian's company to survive because he had bet his own house on it. Dahlia needed Julian rich because status was the only religion she practiced. Celeste needed all of them right, because the alternative was admitting she had protected the wrong child, the wrong man, the wrong story for decades. And I was supposed to be the emergency exit. Martin pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Not the guarantor this time, a wire transfer form. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward me. The gesture was so absurd, I almost did not understand it. Then I saw the amount. $600,000. I laughed. Not loudly, not kindly, but I laughed. Martin's face darkened. "This is not funny." "No," I said. "It's breathtaking." He jabbed one finger at the form. "That amount will stop the foreclosure process and cover the immediate penalties. You can afford it." There it was. The family anthem. You can afford it. As if affordability created obligation. As if my liquidity were a moral defect. As if every dollar I had earned carried a hidden clause naming them as beneficiaries. You came to my office, I said slowly, after forging my name, trying to use my house in a fraud scheme, lying to police, and exposing my company to possible legal risk. And you brought me a wire transfer form? Martin lifted his chin. I brought you a chance to save this family. No, I said. You brought me an invoice for your arrogance. His hand slammed down again. Through the glass, heads turned. Security took one step closer outside. Martin saw it and lowered his voice, but his fury stayed. You think you are above us because you have money. I think I am separate from you because I learned patterns, he sneered. What does that mean? It means I have seen this before. A client steals, the company collapses, the spouse cries. The father wants a quiet settlement. Everyone says they made mistakes. No one wants to say fraud. Then they look for the nearest responsible woman and ask her to absorb the damage. Celeste whispered, Vivian, please. I turned to her. There was a time that would have worked. Please. One word from my mother, soft and desperate, and the child inside me would start calculating how much pain I could swallow to make her stop crying. But Maya was standing beside me, and that changed something. Because if I rescued them now, what would I teach her? That abuse becomes acceptable if the abuser is frightened. That fraud becomes family business if the fraudster cries. That daughters are born to be emptied when men gamble badly? No, not again. Nathan spoke, voice measured. Vivian, for clarity, wiring funds into accounts connected to these matters would be legally unwise. Martin snapped, Stay out of this. Nathan looked at him. You are in my client's conference room asking her to move $600,000 into a compromised financial situation connected to forged documents and an active fraud matter. I am very much in this, I added. Any funds I send could be treated as suspicious, used to claim I ratified prior conduct, or dragged into litigation. My firm, my LLC, and my reputation would all be exposed. Martin scoffed. That is lawyer nonsense. No, I said. That is the language of consequences. Dahlia suddenly began crying harder. So what are we supposed to do? Be homeless? I looked at her. You are almost 30 years old. I'm pregnant. Yes. You have mentioned that. Her face twisted. You really are heartless. No. I am finished funding people who call me heartless when I stop paying. Celeste reached for the wire form and pushed it closer to me with shaking fingers. Please, she said again. I know mistakes were made. Mistakes. I looked at the form, then at Martin, then at Dahlia, then at Celeste. Mistakes were made. That phrase should be illegal. It is the passive voice people use when they want forgiveness without naming the hand that held the knife. I picked up the executive pen lying near the conference room notepad. Everyone watched. Martin's eyes sharpened with hope. Celeste inhaled. Dahlia wiped her cheek. Julian, still near security, stared as if he could not believe even now that I might be that stupid. Maya whispered, Vivian? I glanced at her. Her eyes were wide. Not because she wanted the money saved, because she was afraid I would do what abused daughters do when the guilt gets loud enough. I smiled at her, just slightly. Then I placed the pen over the signature line of the wire form. My father leaned forward. I snapped the pen in half. The sound cracked through the room. Black ink spilled across my fingers, then dripped onto the paper, blooming over the signature line, dark and final. Celeste gasped. Dahlia stared. Martin looked at the ruined form like I had slapped him with it. I pushed it back across the table. You bet your house on Dahlia, I said. You lost. Pay the debt. For a few seconds after I snapped the pen, no one spoke. Ink spread across the wire transfer form like a bruise. It soaked through the signature line, blurred the routing details, stained the bottom edge of the paper, and pooled beneath my father's hand when he instinctively tried to grab it back. Martin stared at the ruined document as if the ink itself had betrayed him. Then he looked at me. I had seen my father angry before. I had seen him disappointed, offended, insulted, impatient, irritated by any version of me that did not fold quickly enough. But I had never seen him helpless. Not truly. Martin Calder had built his entire identity around control. Control of the room, control of the story, control of my mother's emotions, Dahlia's consequences, my obedience. Even his pride was a control mechanism. He used it to make other people shrink around him. But there was no controlling this. Not the binder, not the video, not the police report, not the investors, not Maya, not the ruined wire form bleeding ink across the table. And not me. You will regret this, he said. His voice was low. For most of my life, that tone would have made my stomach tighten. It was the tone he used before punishment, before silence, before family meetings where I was told how badly I had hurt everyone by refusing to be hurt quietly. This time my stomach did not tighten. Something in me had moved beyond fear. No, I said. I think regret is finally being returned to the right owner. Celeste let out a sob. Vivian, please. He is your father. I looked at her. My mother was crying hard now, mascara gathering beneath her lower lashes, one hand pressed to her chest as if grief had become a physical injury. A younger version of me would have gone to her, held her, apologized for making the room so painful, accepted responsibility for the emotional wreckage just to stop her from collapsing. But I was not younger anymore, and Maya was still standing beside me. He should have remembered I was his daughter, I said, before he forged my name. Celeste flinched. Good. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because I wanted the words to land somewhere they could not be rearranged. Martin pushed back from the table. I did what I had to do. No, Nathan said calmly. You did what exposed you to criminal liability. Martin turned on him. I'm not speaking to you. You should, Nathan replied. At this point, speaking only to Vivian has not improved your situation. Dahlia wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of makeup near her cheekbone. Can everyone stop acting like Dad is some monster? Julian is the one who lied. Julian laughed from near the wall, where security still stood close enough to remind him that movement had consequences. That is rich, he said. Dahlia turned. Do not start with me. You signed documents. You sat in the room. You laughed about Vivian being desperate. You wanted the announcement because you thought it made you look important. I was pregnant and stressed. You were greedy. Dahlia's face twisted. Before she could answer, Nathan's phone vibrated. He looked down, read the screen, and then glanced at me. They're here. The room went still. Celeste whispered, Who is here? Nathan did not answer her. He looked at me. Do you want to step out? I knew what he was asking. Not legally, personally. Did I want to avoid watching the next part? For a moment, I considered it. Then I looked at my father, who had forged my signature and still believed himself wronged. I looked at Julian, who had tried to turn my home into bait. I looked at Dahlia, who had abused a child and then hidden behind another one she had not even had yet. I looked at my mother, who had protected all of it until protection became impossible. "No," I said. "Bring them in." Nathan opened the conference room door. Outside, the office had gone very quiet. My employees were still working or pretending to, but every person on the floor understood something serious had shifted. Iris stood near reception with the same composed expression she wore during difficult clients and attempted walk-ins from journalists. Behind her were 2 uniformed officers and 2 plainclothes agents. Not a dramatic swarm. No drawn weapons, no shouting. Just calm authority walking through a corporate office with paperwork and purpose. That was almost worse. Consequences do not always arrive with sirens. Sometimes they arrive in sensible shoes, carrying folders. Officer Ramirez was not there, but one of the uniformed officers looked familiar from the property incident. The 2 plainclothes agents introduced themselves quietly to Nathan first. He stepped into the hall, spoke with them, handed over a copy of something from his folio, then gestured toward the conference room. Through the glass, my father watched them approach. For the first time all morning, he looked old. Celeste stood abruptly. No, Vivian, stop this. I can't. You can. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Tell them you don't want to press charges. I turned toward her fully. Mom, this is not a broken vase. This is forgery involving my legal identity and my company. If I hide it, I risk my firm, my LLC, my reputation, and every employee outside this room. I will not set myself on fire to keep Dad warm. Celeste shook her head. You are choosing strangers over family. I looked through the glass at my staff. I saw Iris standing at reception. I saw employees who had trusted me with their careers. I saw the company that paid for homes, student loans, childcare, medical care, futures. No, I said. I am choosing people who did not forge my name. The door opened. One of the agents stepped in first. He was middle-aged, controlled, and polite in the way people are polite when they do not need your permission. Julian Mercer? Julian's face changed. He had known this was possible, maybe even likely, but knowing a train is coming does not make the impact gentle. Yes, he said. The agent identified himself and explained that Julian needed to come with them for questioning related to an ongoing financial fraud investigation. He did not say prison. He did not announce guilt. He did not perform for the room. That restraint made the moment feel more real. Julian looked at Nathan. Is this because of her? Nathan said, This is because of you. Security stepped aside as the agents approached. Julian turned to Dahlia. For 1 second, something like desperation crossed his face. You need to call my attorney. Dahlia stared at him. Then she said, I don't even know if I can afford mine. Julian's mouth opened. No answer came. The agents escorted him out, not dragged, not shoved. Escorted. But Julian Mercer, who had once filled rooms with manufactured confidence, left my office walking between 2 federal agents while my employees watched in perfect silence. Dahlia covered her mouth, but I could not tell if she was crying for him or for the life he had failed to provide. Then the uniformed officer turned to my father. Martin Calder. Celeste made a sound like something tearing. Martin straightened. Pride tried one final time to dress him. Yes. The officer explained that he was being detained in connection with allegations of forgery and fraudulent documentation related to the property and guarantor materials. Again, the language was careful, formal, realistic, not convicted, not sentenced, not finished, but no longer protected by family myth. Martin looked at me. You did this to your own father. I stood. No, I said. You did this using your daughter's name. His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might say something that sounded like remorse. I do not know why. Hope is stupid like that. Even after everything, it sometimes crawls out from under the rubble and asks whether maybe now, finally, the person who hurt you understands. But Martin only said, "You always thought you were better than us." The last thread snapped quietly. "No," I said. "I kept hoping you were better than this." That landed. I saw it. Not enough to change him, enough to wound. The officer guided him toward the door. Celeste grabbed his sleeve, crying, but he pulled away, embarrassed by her grief even then. He did not look back when they led him out. My mother did. She looked at me through the glass wall as if I were the one leaving her. Then the door closed again. The room felt enormous. Dahlia remained seated, pale and shaking. Celeste stood near the table, one hand over her mouth, staring at the place where Martin had been. Maya was beside me, silent. Nathan checked his phone, then stepped toward the door. I needed to speak with the agents for a moment. I nodded. He left us there. Just the women, the mother who had chosen appearances, the golden daughter who had finally run out of gold, the girl who had told the truth, and me. Celeste turned first. Her grief sharpened into accusation because accusation was easier than accountability. How could you let them take him? I did not let them. I reported what he did. He is 64 years old. He was old enough to forge my signature. He may not survive this. He should have considered that before committing a crime. Celeste pressed both hands to her face. You sound like you don't care. I did care. That was the worst part. I cared enough that my chest hurt. I cared enough that my hands felt cold. I cared enough that somewhere inside me, a daughter was curled on the floor of an old bedroom, watching another parent disappear behind a locked emotional door. But caring did not mean surrendering. I care, I said. I just care about myself now, too. Celeste stared at me as if that were the cruelest thing I had said all day. Maybe to her, it was. Then Dahlia spoke. Her voice was small. Vivian. I turned. She looked destroyed. Not humbled, not transformed, destroyed. There is a difference. Humility opens a door. Destruction simply looks for shelter. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. Celeste looked at her, startled. Dahlia? No, Mom, we don't, Dahlia's voice cracked. Dad's going to be charged. The house is in foreclosure. Julian is probably going to prison eventually. My cards are dead. I have legal documents I apparently signed. I'm pregnant. I don't have a job. She looked at me with wet eyes, and there it was. The pivot, not apology, not remorse, a request forming itself inside tears. I could work here, she said. I stared at her. What? I could work here, she repeated quickly, as if speed might make the idea less insane. Reception, assistant work, something simple. I mean, I'm family, and you need to help me get back on my feet. I heard Iris's voice in my head. No glassware except the table pitcher. No sharp letter openers, because I know families. I almost laughed. Dahlia Mercer, who had mocked my company, mocked my life, helped hijack my housewarming, abused Maya, participated in a fraud scheme, and called me a lonely ATM, was asking for a job in the office where my employees had just watched her family implode. No, I said. Her face changed. You didn't even think about it. I did. The answer is no. I said receptionist. I'm not asking to be executive vice president. You are not qualified to sit at my front desk. Her mouth fell open. Excuse me? My receptionist manages confidential client arrivals, sensitive calls, journalists, attorneys, executives, and hostile family members. Iris has more judgment in one eyebrow than you have shown in 29 years. Dahlia recoiled like I had slapped her. Good. I continued. You are a liability. You participated in a fraud scheme. You abused Maya. You used your pregnancy as a shield. You lied when it benefited you, cried when lying failed, and have not shown 1 second of real remorse. I am your sister. No, you are a risk, Celeste whispered. Vivian, she's pregnant. And unemployed because she chose status over stability. Dahlia began crying again. What am I supposed to do? I looked at her, really looked at her. For most of our lives, Dahlia's panic had been treated like a fire alarm. Everyone rushed, everyone soothed, everyone paid. Everyone rearranged reality so she would not have to stand inside the consequences of being herself. Not this time. You are going to face debt collection, I said. Legal fees, possible bankruptcy, loss of whatever luxury items Julian has not already leveraged. A very complicated paternity situation. Social embarrassment, family resentment, and a life where crying will no longer erase consequences. Her face twisted with hatred. There you are, I said softly. She blinked. That is the real you. Not helpless, not fragile. Angry that the bill finally came to your name. Dahlia stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. You are a miserable, bitter woman. Maya moved slightly closer to me. I did not look away from Dahlia. No, I said. I am a woman you can no longer afford. That sentence did what no argument ever had. It ended her. Dahlia grabbed her purse, but she did not leave willingly. She stood there trembling, crying, waiting for someone to fix the room. No one did. I opened the conference room door. Iris. Iris appeared almost immediately. Yes, Vivian? Please have security escort Dahlia and Celeste out. Revoke visitor access for all Calder and Mercer family members unless approved by Nathan or me in writing. Of course. Celeste looked shattered. Vivian. I did not answer, because there was nothing left to negotiate. Security escorted Dahlia first. She cursed me once under her breath, then louder when no one reacted. Celeste followed more slowly, crying into a tissue, looking back at me again and again, waiting for the daughter reflex to activate. It did not. The glass door closed. The office resumed. Not immediately, but gradually. A phone rang. Someone typed. A printer started. Life, indifferent and merciful, continued. I stood in the empty conference room with ink drying on my fingers and suddenly felt my body remember it was human. My knees weakened. My breath caught. The room tilted slightly. I walked out before anyone could see my face collapse and made it to the restroom at the end of the hall. Inside, I locked myself in the largest stall, then changed my mind and moved to the sink because hiding felt too familiar. I gripped the marble counter. My hands were shaking, badly. The ink had dried in black lines across my fingers, under my nails, along the side of my palm. I turned on the water and scrubbed, but it did not come off immediately. For the first time all day, I let myself feel it. Not regret. I did not regret filing the complaint. I did not regret protecting my company. I did not regret refusing the money. I did not regret removing Dahlia. But I mourned. God, I mourned. Not the family I had. The family I had wanted so badly that I let the real one keep cutting me just because once in a while the blade looked like a hand. A soft knock came at the restroom door. Vivian? Maya? I looked at myself in the mirror. CEO, strategist, daughter, survivor, guardian, maybe. Human, definitely. My eyes were red, my hands were still shaking. I opened the door. Maya stood there, backpack on both shoulders now, her own eyes wet. "Are you okay?" she asked. Such a small question. Such a big one. I looked at this girl who had risked so much to tell the truth. This girl who had been called baggage and difficult and dramatic. This girl who still somehow knew how to ask if someone else was okay. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to be strong for her. Instead, I told her the truth. I will be. 3 months later, the house was quiet again. Not empty, quiet. There is a difference I did not understand until I finally lived inside peace long enough to recognize its sound. Empty is silence with an ache in it. Empty is waiting for footsteps that never come, for approval that never arrives, for a family that only knocks when they need something. Quiet is different. Quiet is a girl laughing upstairs while doing homework on a video call. Quiet is coffee brewing in the kitchen without dread attached to it. Quiet is a security system that protects your home instead of preparing for invasion. Quiet is sunlight across marble counters that no longer feel like evidence in a family crime scene. The legal aftermath was not as dramatic as people imagine revenge should be. No one was dragged instantly to prison for life. No judge slammed a gavel and delivered poetic justice while violins played. Real consequences were slower than that. Paperwork, hearings, frozen accounts, forensic reports, attorney letters, interviews, negotiations, the quiet machinery of systems my family had always assumed could be bullied or charmed. Julian's collapse became public within 2 weeks. Once investors started talking to one another, the story moved faster than his attorneys could contain it. The fake acquisition email, the driveway footage, the non-existent headquarters, the suspicious transfers, the investor materials that promised momentum while the company was eating itself alive. By the end of the second month, Julian accepted a plea arrangement related to financial fraud charges. I did not follow every detail obsessively. Nathan updated me only when it affected my case, my company, or Maya. That was one of the boundaries I kept for myself. Their destruction did not need to become my new hobby. Martin avoided prison, at least initially, because of his age, lack of prior record, and the way his attorney framed him as an older man manipulated by a fraudulent son-in-law. That almost made me laugh. Martin hated being seen as weak, but weakness became useful once pride became expensive. He received probation, fines, and a permanent stain on the reputation he had once treated as more important than my future. The forgery complaint remained on record. The lender backed away from any claim involving me or my LLC. My company was clean. My house was clean. My name was clean. His was not. The family home went into foreclosure 6 weeks after the office confrontation. Celeste called me the day the final notice came. I did not answer. She sent a voicemail. I did not listen. Nathan's office reviewed anything that seemed legally relevant. Everything else went into a folder labeled Calder Family. No response. That folder became one of my favorite things. Eventually, Martin and Celeste moved into a small rented mobile home 2 states away, near one of Celeste's cousins who still believed some version of the story where I had gone too far. I heard that from an aunt who called under the pretense of concern, and then asked if I was really comfortable letting my parents live like that. I told her, "They are living within the consequences of their decisions." She said, "That sounds cold." I said, "It sounds familiar." Then I blocked her too. Dahlia gave birth in the middle of the 3rd month. The baby was healthy. That was the only part of the news that mattered. The trainer disappeared before the paternity issue could become useful to him. Julian's name was still tangled in legal questions. Dahlia's finances were a disaster, and whatever fantasy she had built about being rescued by another man dissolved the moment he realized she came with debt, scandal, and a newborn. Dahlia ended up living with Martin and Celeste in the mobile home. I heard she hated it. I believe that. Dahlia had always mistaken luxury for love, and now she had neither in the form she recognized. Celeste was exhausted, Martin was bitter, the baby cried at night. Dahlia cried louder. No one in that small home had the money, status, or emotional maturity to keep pretending they were victims of anything except themselves. For the first time in her life, Dahlia was surrounded by people exactly like her. I did not celebrate that. But I did not rescue her from it either. Maya was different. Maya was the part of the story people never expected when they asked me if revenge felt good. Revenge felt clean for about 5 minutes. Maya felt like purpose. The emergency guardianship was granted first on a temporary basis. There were hearings after that, interviews, school counselor statements, records, documentation, and more questions than any 16-year-old should have had to answer. But Maya answered them, not perfectly, not without tears, but truthfully. Over time, temporary became extended. Extended became permanent guardianship. Adoption was still being discussed carefully, slowly, on Maya's timeline. I never pushed. I had no interest in becoming another adult who turned her life into a decision made in a room where she did not get a vote. She started therapy twice a week. At first, she hated it. Then she pretended to hate it. Then one day she got into my car after an appointment and said, "My therapist says I'm allowed to be angry and still be kind." I said, "Your therapist sounds expensive and correct." Maya smiled. That smile became one of my favorite things too. She improved in school almost immediately, not because she suddenly became smarter, but because survival stopped taking up so much of her brain. She joined the debate team after her English teacher suggested it. The first time she won an argument in practice, she came home glowing. "I destroyed him respectfully," she said. I told her, "That is the family business." She laughed so hard she almost dropped her backpack. She slept better. Not every night, but many nights. She stopped hiding snacks in her room after the first month. She stopped flinching every time an adult raised their voice on television. She started leaving her shoes by the door instead of keeping them lined up beside her bed like she might need to run. Healing was not cinematic. It was small, a full plate, a closed bedroom door, a calendar on the fridge, someone asking, "Do you need anything?" and meaning comfort, not control. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Celeste. No return address, but I knew her handwriting immediately. Elegant, controlled, a little too decorative. I stood over the kitchen trash can and considered throwing it away unopened. Then I opened it. Not because I owed her, because I wanted to know whether accountability had finally found her. It had not. The letter was 4 pages of suffering, Martin's bitterness, Dahlia's resentment, the baby crying, the rent, the humiliation, the cousin's judgment, Celeste's exhaustion. She wrote that she missed me. She wrote that family should not end this way. She wrote that she hoped I would reconsider some form of support, even if I was not ready to speak. She never wrote, "I am sorry I laughed." She never wrote, "I am sorry we used you." She never wrote, "I should have protected you." So I shredded the letter. Maya watched from the kitchen island, eating cereal from a mug because she had decided bowls were emotionally boring. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked at the shredded paper, then at her. "Yes," I said. "Actually, I am." The real housewarming happened on a Saturday evening in late spring. No investors, no fake announcements, no family members with emergency codes, no champagne tower. Lena planned it again, this time with strict instructions that no one pregnant, fraudulent, or emotionally manipulative got a toast without written approval. The guest list was mine. My employees came. Nathan brought his husband. Iris arrived with a bottle of wine and a look that told me she had already judged the security layout and found it acceptable. Lena wore red and cried when she saw the flowers because she said she had earned this party spiritually. A few close friends came. Maya invited 3 girls from debate team, all of whom looked terrified of my kitchen until Maya told them where the snacks were. The house felt different, full of people who wanted nothing from me except my presence. That was new. For years, I had thought safety meant locked doors. That night, I learned safety could also sound like laughter echoing off stone, music drifting over the pool, Nathan arguing with Lena about cocktail garnishes, Iris teaching Maya's friends how to identify a manipulative apology, and someone in my kitchen asking where to put extra dessert. Near sunset, I raised a glass. Everyone quieted. For once, silence did not scare me. I used to think family was something you survived, Waits, I said. Something you managed, something you paid for in pieces of yourself and called loyalty because that sounded better than fear. Maya stood near the pool with her friends, watching me. I continued. I was wrong. Family is not proven by blood. It is proven by safety, by respect, by loyalty that does not require silence, by love that does not arrive with an invoice. Nathan lifted his glass slightly. I looked around my home. My actual home. Blood may explain where you started, I said, but it does not get to decide where you belong. People drank to that. Later, after the sun disappeared and the pool lights turned the water silver, I stood near the back doors and watched Maya laughing with her friends. Her head was tilted back. Her shoulders were loose. Her whole body looked lighter than when she first came to me, as if some invisible weight had finally been set down. For years, I had thought winning would feel like proving my family wrong. It did, a little, but that was not the best part. The best part was standing inside the house they tried to steal and realizing they had never understood its value. They thought it was worth $2.5 million. They were wrong. It was worth the first peaceful breath I took inside it. It was worth Maya sleeping safely upstairs. It was worth every locked door I had opened only for people who knew how to enter with respect. For the first time in my life, no one in that house wanted my money, my silence, or my obedience. They only wanted me there. And that was when I finally understood what winning really felt like.